Chapter 285. She was dumbfounded and grabbed her hand. What do you mean I was deceived? Chenga sneered. Two disrespectful old men. When they left, they didn't want to see me again. What human furnace are you talking about? How is that possible? If those two old men weren't going to come back, it was impossible for them to capture him as a human furnace for Chenga. She was completely petrified when he realized this. What was he doing all these years? Are you sure? He was doubtful. They really weren't going to come back? I'm sure, absolutely sure. Chenga said angrily, at that time I just built my foundation. Deification cultivators like them can casually enter closed-door meditation for thousands of years. Who knows if I'll still be alive when they come back? Only an idiot like you would believe that. She thought about it and felt something was wrong. But, if that's the case, why did they have to transform my body? Chenga continued to sneer. They're deification cultivators. Can't they play with little cultivators because they're bored? How dare you say I'm paranoid? They gave you benefits and deceived you. Fine, he was successfully deceived. Moreover, he was deceived for dozens of years and suffered for dozens of years. If those two old men knew this, they'd definitely be very proud. After thousands of years in the deification realm, did they go crazy from boredom? They obviously gave him benefits, but they acted like they were scheming against him. They didn't want his gratitude but wanted to make him feel disgusted. He wasted dozens of years on this kind of thing. What on earth was he doing? After figuring this out, both of them were silent. One was speechless and the other was gnashing her teeth. After a long time, she heard Chinshi's voice. Chenga. What? She asked fiercely. You cough. You what? You don't know how to say something? Chinshi didn't say anything. Instead, he reached out to grab a casually thrown underwear, put it on her and carefully wrapped it up. At first, Chenga didn't know what he was doing, but as she watched his movements, she suddenly realized that her clothes were disheveled. The front of her robe was torn and her undergarments were faintly discernible. She immediately swatted his hand away, then wrapped herself up and curled up into a ball. He didn't know if this feeling was called wanting more, but he was sure he was very disappointed. If he knew this, he wouldn't have reminded her. What are you looking at? He smiled as he leaned closer and whispered, You're blushing. Chenga was stunned. She grabbed her robe with one hand and randomly fumbled for something with her other hand before throwing it at him again. Chenga? Even if he was a cultivator and couldn't smash people to death, but she was too violent. Why didn't he realize she was such a person in the past? She couldn't bear it anymore. He grabbed her hands and firmly pressed her against his chest. Don't move. Do you want to smash me to death? I'd rather smash you to death. Chenga struggled. If you think it's too troublesome, then die for me to see. You? This was simply unreasonable. Me what? Qin Shoujing, let go of me. You've gone too far today. Fine, it was a little too much, but if he hadn't confirmed her feelings, he wouldn't have. Are you going to let go or not? Unable to break free, she became more and more angry and pushed him away. She did manage to push him away, but he was pushed to the rock wall by her. He immediately let out a muffled groan and froze. She struggled out of his embrace. Seeing his sweaty appearance, she couldn't help but ask, What's wrong? After a long time, he finally showed a bleak smile. He wanted to raise his hand but couldn't, so he could only frown and say, My back. His back was injured. Thinking of this, Chenga felt a bit regretful, but it was already too late. She could only ask, Can you move? He shook his head. Wait a minute. He waited for a while with cold sweat all over his body. When the pain seemed to have subsided a bit, he finally moved his body and turned his back. Chenga's heart trembled when she saw the back of his newly changed robe was bloody again. She then looked at the rock wall, which was also stained with a lot of blood. It was obvious that her push just now had caused his wound to split open. Take off your clothes, she said after a while. She obediently went to untie his belt, but his hands trembled for a long time and still couldn't lift them. He could only look at her helplessly and say, It hurts too much. Even moving my hand hurts. After pausing for a while, Chenga moved forward and lowered her head to untie his belt. This time it was much smoother, but it was even more embarrassing. At that time, she only thought about treating his injury and didn't think about anything else. Now she kissed him and hugged him. She lowered her head and didn't dare to look at his face. She only breathed a sigh of relief when she took off his clothes and didn't worry that he would see her face. Then she concentrated on treating his wound again. She untied his belt and sure enough, his wound ruptured. She treated it as before and continued to help him change his clothes. During the whole process she kept her head down and didn't say a word. When everything was done, she pretended that nothing had happened and started to clean up the medicine bottles she threw everywhere in the cave. Ahem. He was restless and wanted to attract her attention. What are you doing? If you still want your injury to get better, behave. I didn't. He said 2 words and then pulled her hand in a flattering manner. I haven't finished talking yet. What else do you want to say? He didn't know where to start since he was interrupted. He hesitated for a long time and finally said, in short, those 35 years. I just couldn't figure it out, so, later on you finally came back and entered the 10,000 laws of nature formation, but in the end you injured your sea of consciousness. Only then did I realize that no matter what those 2 soul formation seniors said, my feelings for you always existed. Feelings? Emo Chenga looked at him suspiciously. Do you have feelings for me? Why would you suspect that I don't have feelings for you? Chinshi was startled and asked back. How would I know you have feelings for me? Emo Chenga was even more baffled. Did you tell me? Did I? Fine, no. But I've made it very obvious, okay? Obvious? Where? I ended my closed-door meditation because I sensed something happened to you. Then, in order to wake you up quickly, I went out to look for medicine. I also brought you to Demonic Mountain. If it was someone else, I wouldn't have cared. What's with that expression? The expression that says you're an idiot. Emo Chenga couldn't stand it anymore. Regardless of whether his wound was just bandaged or not, she slapped his hand away. Yes, the things you do always make me feel like you have feelings for me. But just as I thought that, you looked at me coldly and hinted that I shouldn't think too highly of myself. Chinshi was tongue-tied. I didn't mean that. Emo Chenga continued to sneer. I don't care whether you did or not. That's what you meant. She still hadn't calmed down. She was being unreasonable. He took a deep breath and said, Fine, I'll tell you now. You misunderstood me. I actually think about you every day. I think about you even in my dreams. I miss you so much that I'm crazy. Do you understand now? What do you mean by not saying anything? Chinshi was anxious. He had never said this kind of thing in his life, and he didn't plan to say it again. Are you going back on your words again? What do you mean again? Emo Chenga finally spoke. Aren't you? Chinshi said with some confusion. In the beginning, I indeed sensed that you had developed different feelings for me. But at that time, I thought you were a smart person who knew how to control yourself, so I didn't say anything. Later, I figured it out and came out of closed-door meditation, but you coldly turned around and left. Master told me you needed time to accept it, so I didn't disturb you and just thought of a way to form my nascent soul. But more than 10 years passed and you still didn't look for me. Right after that, you formed your gold core. If you really had feelings for me, why could you form your gold core? Say something. Emo Chenga resisted the urge to slap him again. She clenched her teeth and said, Why couldn't I form my gold core? If you didn't say anything, how would I know you really did it for me? Maybe it was just because my father entrusted you to go out and look for medicine for me, but you just didn't expect the consequences to be so serious. Chinshi was speechless. He didn't say anything because he thought his actions were enough to make her understand. Unfortunately, she was afraid of misunderstanding and didn't dare to think highly of herself, so she never understood. After a long time, he continued to ask, What about you? What were you thinking? What could I think? If you didn't want it, I didn't dare to force you. You wholeheartedly wanted to form your nascent soul, so why should I be so stubborn? I couldn't form my nascent soul because of you, but you didn't dare to force me? Chinshi couldn't help but question her. How would I know? Emo Chenga lowered her head. Although she didn't want to admit defeat, her tone was weak. You never told me either. Chinshi said, You even called me an idiot. You're not that smart. If you didn't refuse to say anything, I would have thought you already had no feelings for me. You said I didn't say anything, but not only did you say nothing, but you also didn't ask anything. Emo Chenga's anger flared again, but he was injured, so she could only turn her anger into words. Why do I have to say everything and ask everything? You're a fickle and messy person, yet you still want me to understand everything? I'm not so smart that I can see what's going on in your head. You're unreasonable. You're the unreasonable one. The two of them glared at each other. In any case, they both thought the other was wrong. After glaring at her for a while, Chinshi was the first to give in. He gently pulled her sleeve and said softly, Fine, if you say so, then so be it. Do you understand now? He smiled fawningly and moved forward to hug her, but he was slapped away. Then he unyieldingly pulled her arm again. I'm an idiot and you're an idiot with me. In short, we're two idiots. Isn't this fair? Oh, if you don't say anything, I'll take it that you're not angry anymore. I'm not an idiot. Fine, you're not. But we've wasted a lot of time. From now on, let's not waste any more, okay? If you don't say anything, I'll take it that you agree. I didn't. He swallowed the rest of his words, so he smiled cheerfully. You really agreed. Chapter 286. After being forced to agree, Chinga found that the person who was half dead a moment ago was suddenly full of vigor. This cave was so narrow that they couldn't even lie down, so he took out his flying sword and cut a large piece of the rock wall, at least enough for the two of them to lie down. Chinga was dumbfounded. She put the stone he cut into his chinkuin bag and noticed her gaze. What's wrong? So these stones can be cut. He touched his nose and avoided her gaze. Although the material is quite special, my sword isn't an ordinary sword. Then why didn't you do it yesterday? The two of them squeezed in such a small place and couldn't move, so he took advantage of her a lot. It wasn't necessary. She looked innocent. I just wanted to rest for a while. Was there a need to open an immortal's cave? Both of us are injured now, so we have to rest here for a few days. That's why I wanted to make it more comfortable. Chinga swallowed her anger. You swear you didn't do it on purpose? Of course not, he said righteously. Think about it. Back then your father and I, two men, didn't waste our strength even when we were squeezed in here. These stones in Demonic Mountain aren't ordinary things. Look, I cut them and even wanted to take them out. These can at least be used to refine tools. Why did she feel like something was wrong? She felt like she was being fooled. All right, don't think too much, she said. Quickly put your things away. You have to change your habit of smashing people. Perhaps she had been repressed for too long? If she wanted to vent her emotions, she could just slap him, but why did she like smashing people? You really have a lot of demands. I'm doing it for my own safety. She changed her words halfway. You really have a lot of medicinal pills? Most of the things he picked up were jade bottles. He opened them and smelled them. They were all medicinal pills. However, he felt something was wrong. The quality of these medicinal pills was too good. Even with his pill concocting skills, he didn't think he could concoct them. He remembered the medicinal pill he got from Yijinji and gave to Xiaohua. Just as he thought about it, the medicinal pill in his hand was immediately taken away by Chinga. She plugged the bottle and put it into her chinkuin bag. She didn't say, so he didn't ask. It was impossible for the two of them to have no secrets. Besides, they weren't in that kind of relationship yet. Silently, he collected his things. After a while, Chinga was the first to break the silence. She suddenly asked, why did your attitude suddenly change today? Didn't you say that you don't think I have feelings for you anymore? Upon hearing this, she just smiled. Chinga's curiosity was piqued by his smile. She couldn't help but glare at him. Speak. It's not like I can't tell you. He held back his laughter. Chinga couldn't bear it anymore. She pounced on him and pinched him. Don't keep me guessing. Tell me. All right, I'll tell you. Hugging her, he laughed and said, You definitely don't know that you talk in your sleep. Chinga was stunned. Sleep talking? Yes. Sleep talking? Cultivators rarely slept, and when they occasionally fell asleep, no one would be by their side, so she didn't know about it at all. Thinking of this, she was a little nervous. What did I say? She was still smiling with his lips pursed. He lowered his head and brushed his lips against hers, but he said, I won't talk about this. He clearly knew what he said, but he didn't tell her. This kind of feeling was too uncomfortable. Did he say something very mushy? I won't talk. He looked determined not to talk. Are you going to talk or not? If I won't talk, I won't talk. Ahem, if you throw yourself into my arms now, I can think about it. After a moment of silence, things began to fly in the small cave again. Go to hell. After tossing and turning for a long time, she still couldn't pry his mouth open. All the things were thrown away and his wound opened again. With no other choice, she stopped to bandage his wound again. The two of them continued to squat down and pick up things. Suddenly, she was stunned. He picked up a stone the size of a child's fist. It was obviously a piece of ore. It was white in color, but there were many natural cracks on it. It looked no different from ordinary stones. He looked at it for a while, then suddenly opened his right hand. Flames appeared in his palm and surrounded the whole ore. What are you doing? Emo Chenga was startled. She shook his head and didn't speak. He just focused on the ore in his palm. After a while this ore finally changed. The cracks on it turned into clouds. Emo Chenga's expression changed. She put away the flames in his palm and handed the ore to her. Chiyun stone. Where did you get it? Chiyun stone? Emo Chenga took it and was completely dumbfounded. This is Chiyun stone. Yes, I shouldn't be mistaken. She was also a bit surprised. We've been looking for it for so long but we didn't find it. Where did this come from? This is... Emo Chenga scratched her head. This was what they got from Ziwei's Immortal's cave after they divided the loot with Taoist Fangjing. It was actually the Chiyun stone that they'd only heard about but never seen. In that case, didn't she have a chance to get her natal magic weapon? Chiyun stone was found and 1,000-year-old chalcedony wasn't too rare. As long as they found heavenly aromatic beans on Demonic Mountain, they could exchange them for chalcedony. I got this the last time I went out to travel. She slowly told him about Ziwei's Immortal's cave, including how Wanderer Ziwei left a mark in her and Taoist Fangjing's Sea of Consciousness and how he asked them to find Xiao Xilan's remains and bury them together with him within 200 years. She didn't take this matter too seriously because she still wasn't strong enough. For now, she still couldn't accomplish what Wanderer Ziwei entrusted to her. Shi's expression turned solemn. So you're saying that there's a mark in your brain that will flare up in 200 years? Emo Chenga thought for a moment then said, it's been 49 years so it should be 151 years later. He nodded but didn't say anything. He just lowered his head in contemplation. Emo Chenga played with the Chiyun stone in her hand and said, there's still 151 years left. Even if I can't form my nascent soul, I can at least reach the late stage of the core formation realm, right? I'll have more assurance when I go there. She shook his head, took her hand and said, having a mark in your brain isn't a good thing. When we go back we'll let Master see if he can remove it. If he can't, we'll have to think of a way to complete what he entrusted me with. I know what I'm doing. It was clear that he was rejecting him. She was silent for a long time before he sighed and said to her, Chenga, can you not treat me as an outsider? I don't. If he was an outsider, she wouldn't have said this kind of thing. Then why? He paused, trying to find a suitable way to say it. I think you don't trust me too much. You always want to make your own decisions and aren't willing to listen to me. Emo Chenga was stunned. She withdrew her hand, turned around, and silently sorted out the other things she threw in the cave. After she put everything into her Chenkuan bag, she said, Maybe you haven't realized it, but you like to take the initiative too much. When I'm by your side, I almost don't need my own thoughts. I just need to follow you. She was a bit stunned. He really hadn't realized it. After thinking for a while, he said, Is there anything wrong with that? There are some things you don't understand but the things I know. Before he could finish, he was interrupted by Emo Chenga's chuckle. This chuckle definitely wasn't the relaxed kind of chuckle. It carried a bit of helplessness and worry. She nodded and said, You're right. This isn't a problem. If we were just companions, I'd think you'd be the best companion. However, this isn't the only time. The most fundamental problem between us is that your cultivation level is much higher than mine, and your experience is also much richer than mine. I still have to learn how to deal with some things, but you've already passed that stage. But have you ever thought about it? If I stay with you like this, will I still need to grow in the future? You'll be in charge of everything, but what about me? I'll be fine as long as I follow you. Isn't it like being a human furnace? He was dumbfounded for a moment before he said, Even if you stay with me you can still grow. If you encounter a lot of things you'll naturally know what to do. It's not that I can't, but that I don't need to, she said quietly. Do you think I just don't want to ask? I don't dare. No matter what your answer is, I don't dare. Just like now. You said you have me in your heart and I'm very happy, but even so, what should I do in the future? If we stay together, it won't just be a matter of feelings. His expression gradually darkened. After a long time, he said softly, Could it be that you want to leave me because of this? Silence spread in the cave. Emo Chenga lowered her head and didn't say anything. Her attitude made him more and more restless. He grabbed her wrist then whispered, Then what do you want? After what you said, do you still want me to let go? Emo Chenga shook her head softly. No. Let me think about it. I still don't know what to do now. Let me think clearly. Although she didn't directly refuse, he was disappointed. This represented a certain possibility, the possibility he was most afraid of. The most frightening thing wasn't losing something but losing it after obtaining it. He remembered the story she told him just now. Wanderer Ziwei. Although he didn't personally experience it, he understood why this senior from several thousand years ago still lingered and refused to leave even after he passed away in meditation for several thousand years. Because he obtained it, lost it, and couldn't see it for the rest of his life, so he couldn't forget it until he died. If he didn't know her feelings just now, if he never obtained it and didn't know what it felt like to be in love with each other, maybe he would also slowly lose interest and walk on the road to becoming an immortal. But, it's impossible, he said softly. Don't do this kind of thing. I haven't, but you think so? He suddenly raised his voice and stared at her with a gloomy gaze. Then what do you want me to do? Emo Chenga also raised her voice. I can't do nothing. So what if you just stay by my side? Can't I protect you? Why do you have to rely on yourself? We're like this. I can help you and you can continue to cultivate. Forming your nascent soul or even deification isn't impossible. Emo Chenga didn't say anything. She raised her head and looked at him as if he was a stranger, saying nothing. This kind of silence made him angry, but it also made him more restless. After a long time, he reached out and gently pulled her sleeve. Chenga, say something. Okay. She finally smiled, but it was a cold, unsmiling smile. This kind of smile scared him. She said, You really don't understand anything. Chapter 287. The sudden quarrel made the two of them feel suffocated, especially since they had no experience in quarreling with others. This kind of sulking feeling was too uncomfortable. Unfortunately, the space in this small cave was so big that they could occupy one end of it. They couldn't even find something to do even if they wanted to. Before long, Qinshi regretted it. Why did he waste so much effort to expand the cave just now? If it was still the same as before, he just needed to be thick-skinned and endure it and it might be fine. But now he couldn't endure it and he couldn't put down his pride. He had never done this kind of thing and he didn't know how to get along with women. He just felt that she was sometimes like this, sometimes like that, and didn't listen to anything he said. He really didn't know what to do. But he didn't think he was wrong. There were many dual cultivation partners in this world. How could every pair of dual cultivation partners be equal in strength? There was always a front and a back. What was wrong with relying on one's partner? As he thought of this, he forgot that his self-esteem had been shattered into pieces by the word human furnace, and could not recover for dozens of years. Emo Chenga kept her back to him and calmly tidied up the medicine bottles. He didn't know how she got so many things to tidy up, but she kept tidying up one after another. Until devil aura floated in from outside and blocked the entrance of the light. I'm sorry. Qinshi was stunned. Emo Chenga coughed. Relying on the darkness and her back to him, she plucked up her courage. I know you mean well, but some things aren't that simple. Maybe you don't think it's a big deal, but it's very important to me. Even after a long time, there was no response. She couldn't help but feel annoyed. She wasn't good at quarreling and she felt even more unhappy. Thus, she carried this annoyance into her words. Of course, if you think all your ideas are right and do everything you say, then I have nothing to say. There was the sound of wind behind her. Just as she was about to turn around, she was hugged from behind. I'm sorry. His voice was low, but it was very clear. It was only 3 words, but she felt all her previous anger disappear. The two of them hugged each other like this. I know I was too impulsive just now. I shouldn't have given you time to think, he said. There's no need for that. She pulled his hand away and turned around. Looking into his eyes in the dark, she said seriously, I apologize for my attitude just now. I was also very impulsive. However, we still have to make things clear. Do you agree? Yes. Emo Chenga thought for a long time, but she didn't know where to start, so she might as well start from the beginning. I was born in the secular world. Although I'm just an ordinary village girl, I inherited my mother's surname and my clan's seniority. From the very beginning, my mother raised me like a boy. When I was little, I wanted to study like those boys and I wanted to read better than them. Mother always said that my father said that no matter if it was a man or a woman, his children should be brought up well. So she would give me whatever she could, and I would do my best to do what I could. Later on, Mother passed away and I set foot on the path of cultivation. I went to Kunwu and met second uncle. Second uncle said that perhaps other female cultivators can slack off, but I can't. My physique is both a capital and a life-threatening talisman. Therefore, not only do I have to be more outstanding than female cultivators, but I also have to work harder than most male cultivators. After talking for a long time like this, she almost forgot what she wanted to say. There were some things she rarely recalled because every time she did, there was only one person. But now there was someone listening, so she couldn't help but talk about those 10-odd years, about the joys and sorrows she experienced with second uncle. I've already become accustomed to this kind of life, and this has also become my own belief. It's not that I don't trust you or don't want to listen to you, but this goes against my belief for so many years. Second uncle said that being sentimental and weak are the archenemies of female cultivators, so he always asked me to be independent and to not rely on anyone, even if one day I find someone who can accompany me. She raised her head and met his gaze. If I really don't have to do anything in the future, it would be tantamount to denying my previous life of more than 80 years. The devil aura floated away, illuminating the cave. She didn't say anything for a long time, but he also didn't let go of her. These memories reminded him of the 3 years he spent in Yunwu sect. During those 3 years he was indifferent at first, then he discovered her secret, and in the end he was very interested. When he first learned about her secret he was a bit confused because she was different from those women he looked down on. Then he thought maybe she was the kind of woman he admired, like Martial Uncle Miaoi or Senior Martial Sister Sushin. Later he thought she was tenacious and hard-working. If a cultivator had such qualities, they could achieve great things if they had enough fated chances and luck. In the next few decades he watched her grow step by step. In the past he thought it was really good that she had such a strong character. These were all qualities he admired. At least she wouldn't turn into a woman he hated. But now that their relationship was different, he felt that it was not the case. So what if she relied on him? If he couldn't bring her anything, what was the point of being with him? He felt very confused, so he said the same thing. Emo Chenga's eyes widened. She turned around and glared at him. Do you think bringing me something is meaningful to me? She also widened his eyes. Isn't that the case? Emo Chenga was speechless. Only now did she realize there was a problem with their communication. What's wrong? Tell me. She thought for a moment, then asked, what if we switched places? He didn't understand what she meant. She said again, what if our genders were switched and you were a woman? This assumption made Chinshi's face darken. Do I look like a woman? Emo Chenga slapped his hand away, leaned against the rock wall, and looked at him with her arms crossed. In fact, you don't think highly of women, do you? Yes. Although he knew it was better to deny it, he still chose to admit it. Then do you look down on me? Of course not. He hurriedly explained, if I looked down on you, I wouldn't have contacted you in Yunwu sect. I already knew you were a woman, but, seeing his expression, Emo Chenga smiled. Why are you so anxious? I didn't say anything about you. He sighed, feeling like he couldn't explain himself. Emo Chenga looked at him and said, you see, you actually have a certain degree of prejudice against women because some people don't want to make progress. If I were like those women who don't want to make progress, would you still look at me differently? No. Then that's it, she said briskly. Isn't the reason why you look at me differently because of my personality? If we get together and I rely on you in the future after a long time, maybe you'll think I'm very annoying. How could that be possible? He denied instinctively, but he couldn't give a reason. No need for this and that. I'm not making things difficult for you. Emo Chenga pressed his hand and said earnestly, in fact, I only discovered another side of you after coming out this time. What? He was a bit nervous. Let's assume. She carefully chose her words. If I get together with you, you'll take care of everything, right? What's wrong with that? She didn't answer and continued to say, you'll do everything, you'll shoulder all the responsibilities, and you'll solve all the problems. Will that be the case? He couldn't answer. She didn't need to hear his answer. Just by looking at his guilty expression, Emo Chenga already knew his answer. I'm not saying it's bad for you to be like this. She said, from a mortal's point of view, you're a responsible person. You'll do things for the person you like rather than instructing others to do things. Just like those villagers in Emo family's village who always let their wives run circles around them, Emo Chenga was just like those villagers in Emo family's village. But we're cultivators. I'm not a mortal woman. If I follow you like this, I won't have a sense of existence. After saying that, she didn't know what to say, so she asked, do you understand? She was still silent. No one knew what he was thinking. It wasn't until a long time later that he said, I probably understand what you mean. You want to say that me being like this will turn you into the kind of woman who does nothing but rely on others? Just like Martial Uncle Miaoi and Senior Martial Sister Sushin, he couldn't imagine that they would stand behind a man. Presumably, Chenga also couldn't do that. More or less. In fact, she wanted to say that his personality was too strong, but her personality was also very tough. If they stayed together like this, there would definitely be conflicts. But if she said that, he would be nervous again, wouldn't he? All right. He said seriously, I'll try to change as much as I can. I won't take care of everything and I'll give you a chance to grow. I'll let you rely on your own strength to move forward. Is this enough? She smiled but didn't say anything. Instead, she slowly leaned on him, opened her arms and for the first time, took the initiative to hug him. He also smiled, but he also said seriously, but I also have a request for you. First, she interrupted him. How many more do you have? I've just started. He was dissatisfied. All right, you go first. First, no matter what happens in the future, don't try to solve it by leaving. Do you agree or not? He urged. Yes. Chenga didn't hesitate for too long. This request wasn't excessive at all. If they could be together honestly, there was naturally nothing that couldn't be solved. Second, you can try to have a request for me. Huh? What kind of request is this? Seeing her doubt, she smiled. Although I appreciate self-reliant women, if you're too strong, I won't have a sense of existence. So, if you can rely on me for something, just rely on me. She didn't answer for a long time, so he was a bit nervous. Not good? All right, we'll both take a step back. She couldn't ask him to take a step back for everything. If she did that, wouldn't it be no different from asking for everything? She was a very fair person. But there's no third request, right? She smiled and hugged her tightly. Oh. Chenga counted her fingers and said, you have 2 requests and I can also change them. Let's make a 2-point agreement. This also wants the same? Isn't it too fair? She ignored him and continued to say, first, you have to trust me. No matter what the situation is, you have to believe what I say. As long as you can do it, I'll also trust you completely. Okay. He didn't hesitate at all. Second, give me a chance to grow on my own until I can stand side by side with you. No problem. Third, didn't you say there's a 2-point agreement? I was just saying. Chapter 288. Chenga held the stone in her hand and stared at it for a long time. This was the Chiyun stone she got from Wanderer Ziwei and had forgotten in the depths of her Chinkuan bag. This Chiyun stone wasn't big, it was only the size of a child's fist, but she said such a big Chiyun stone was already very rare. The Chiyun stone he saw was even smaller. Okay, she wasn't greedy. It was good enough to have it. However, such a small Chiyun stone couldn't be wasted when refining magic weapons. She could only refine it twice at most, which required a high level of tool refining skills. Her tool refining talent was really not good. It wasn't that she didn't practice these years, but she could only refine magic weapons now, and the success rate wasn't very high. Originally, she was going to find a tool refining master in the group to refine magic weapons, but if she only had 2 Chiyun stones, she didn't even dare to find a tool refining master. Refining a natal magic treasure was not the same as refining an ordinary magic treasure. A natal magic treasure had to be connected with the cultivator, so the cultivator had to be present when refining the magic treasure. When to add the blood essence and what effect to achieve, the refiner had to have a very good understanding of the cultivator and the magic treasure. The best way was to refine it herself, but in that case she would have to spend a lot of effort and time to improve her tool refining skills. So troublesome. She muttered to herself. What troublesome? Shi, who was meditating to heal his wounds, opened his eyes and glanced at her. Chenga held the Chiyun stone in her hand and said, we have the materials but it's very troublesome to refine it. That thing is only a kind of magic weapon conceived by primordial Lady Bisui. She never tested whether it would work or not. Besides, there are so few materials. She said, I'll refine it myself. It's better to refine a natal magic weapon with someone else's help than to refine it myself. Chenga smiled bitterly. It'd be good if it was that easy, but I don't know how to refine tools. Learn, it's not that difficult. Hearing this understatement, Chenga glared at him. It's easy for you to say, but not everyone has such good tool refining talent. She raised his eyebrows. I think your pill refining skills are very good. Refining tools and refining pills are the same, so your tool refining skills shouldn't be too bad. This is different. Her pill refining skills were honed by using countless spiritual herbs, but where could she get so many materials for refining weapons? If he were to purchase them wantonly, it would attract too much attention. Why is it different? You will know in the future. She didn't say much. He just stared at her with a gaze that made her feel very uneasy. Emo Chinga felt uncomfortable from his stare. What are you looking at? Have you recovered from your injury? She turned around. Do you want to have a checkup? Forget it, she muttered. To a cultivator, this kind of injury might look terrible, but after a few days, it would heal without even a scar. He was clearly seizing the opportunity to do something. Sure enough, she was very disappointed, but he still didn't give up and asked, You really don't want it? Emo Chinga rolled her eyes at him, then put away the Chiyun stone and continued to ponder about magic weapons. The injuries to their meridians and dantians were almost healed after they healed each other. Right now, Chi's injuries were mainly flesh wounds and would be healed in a few days. Emo Chinga's injuries were injuries to her divine sense. Although she looked completely fine, she would need several years to recuperate. When are we going up? This question made she put away his smile. He stared at her with a meaningful gaze. Don't you want to stay here for a few more days? Don't we still have things to do? Emo Chinga lowered her head and didn't notice his expression. I'll feel uneasy if I don't finish them. He didn't say anything. The two of them minded their own business. They were inside the mountain wall of tens of thousands of feet peak. Although there was devil aura outside, it was blocked by the restrictions they set up. It wouldn't be too much to say that this was the safest place on Demonic Mountain. It had been 7 or 8 days since Demonic Mountain opened, and many cultivators had encountered danger outside. If they wanted to preserve their strength, it was best to stay here. He originally thought it would be best to stay here for another 7 days. Half a month was enough time to do things, and this place wouldn't be disturbed. Rumble? Suddenly, a loud noise came from somewhere and the mountain began to shake. What's wrong? Sensing that the small cave they were in was also shaking, Emo Chinga's expression changed. Could it be that the mountain here is also going to collapse? She looked solemn. In just a short while, they saw countless stones rolling down through the gap in the cave entrance. The defensive restrictions they set up to block devil aura couldn't stand it and broke in no time. Not good. A big restriction is collapsing. Emo Chinga was stunned. Just like what happened more than 80 years ago? She shook his head. It shouldn't be as serious as it was 80 years ago. But the trouble is, it's very close to us this time. He stepped forward and pulled Emo Chinga over. He took out his 3-yang real fire sword and formed a defensive sword formation around the two of them. Where's your defensive magic weapon? Emo Chinga fumbled in her Chinkuan bag. The white silk handkerchief turned into mist and wrapped around the two of them. The shaking became more and more violent. The two of them held each other tightly and were barely able to stand firm. Fortunately, the cave they were in went deep into the mountain. It was very sturdy and small, so there were no signs of collapse. The shaking continued for almost an hour without stopping, and there were still many stones falling from above. Emo Chinga couldn't help but raise her head and ask, Why is it taking so long? She said, Back then your father and I were trapped here for 7 days. During the first 3 days, stones kept falling and almost buried us here. Later we went to the top of the mountain and saw that the towering mountain had actually been flattened. Rest assured it'll be fine. Emo Chinga wasn't worried about anything. Relying on their magic weapons and cultivation levels, even if the restrictions on 10,000 feet peak collapsed, it wouldn't be a problem for them to keep their lives here. However, she was worried that the restrictions at the entrance would be affected and appear prematurely, causing them to be trapped here. The rumbling sounds grew louder, and through the cracks, more and more rocks rolled down. Both of them had a grave expression on their faces. It seemed that the commotion was too big. All of a sudden, a cyan figure appeared among these stones. A white light flashed and in an instant, it entered the gap in the cave entrance they were in. Then a cyan-clothed man jumped inside. Cough, cough. The man coughed twice. He was covered in stone fragments and his face was covered in dust. He was in a very sorry state. He dusted off the debris on his sleeves and pulled out the flying sword inserted in the cave entrance. When he turned around and saw the two of them, he was stunned. It's you? This person was Jing Xingji. He looked at them and finally looked at their interlocked hands. He said with a faint smile, You two really know how to pick a place. Here, there's really no one to disturb you. She didn't like him and his words were so ambiguous. Shi's expression immediately darkened. Fellow Taoist Jing, please conduct yourself with dignity. Cough, cough. Jing Xingji dusted off the debris and said, How am I not conducting myself? I'm not falsely accusing you. As he said that, he cast a sidelong glance at him. Fellow Taoist Shojing, the matter between a man and a woman is a man's great desire. Why do you have to hide it? Jing Xingji. Shi shouted. The more he talked, the more outrageous he became. Alright. Jing Xingji waved his hand and said carelessly, "You're thin-skinned, so I won't talk about it, okay?" His peach blossom eyes looked at Mo Tiange. "Unfortunately, fellow Daoist Qingwei, we met too late." She didn't say anything. He directly waved his hand, and the 3 young real fire sword floated in front of him. Jing Xingji retreated helplessly. "I'm afraid of you. I was just joking. Why are you so boring?" Then he said rudely, "Lend me a place to hide." After he said that, a sword light flashed and the flying sword went into the stones. He held the flying sword and looked outside vigilantly. He looked like he was on guard against something. Mo Tiange asked, "Fellow Daoist Jing, why did you appear here?" Jing Xingji still looked outside and said casually, "What else can I do? I was tricked by those 2 old guys. You're smart and left early." As soon as he said that, Shi's attention was also drawn to him. Jing Xingji glanced at them and said, "I originally guessed that Kumu and Tong Tianyun, those 2 old guys, must have other purposes, but we're old friends for more than 100 years, so I wasn't too vigilant against them. We originally planned to split up at the foot of tens of thousands of feet peak, but they said their purpose this time was Immortal's Ruins, so the 3 of us all followed them." "Did you arrive at Immortal's Ruins smoothly?" Shi asked. Jing Xingji shook his head. "Not at all. Madame Feng's injuries became more and more serious. They abandoned her when they crossed the Ruoshui River, but Lei Dongqing unexpectedly turned back to save her and died in the Ruoshui River with her. Alas, I really couldn't tell. I thought Lei Dongqing just liked Madame Feng's beauty, so he usually teased her. I didn't expect him to be infatuated with her. Unfortunately." Shi and Mo Tiange looked at each other. They were both surprised and secretly rejoiced. Fortunately, they escaped in time. Otherwise, even if they were on guard, they would definitely get into a lot of trouble if they were involved in this dispute. "What about you? Why did you fall from above? You should have arrived at Immortal's Ruins with them, right?" Jing Xingji nodded. "As soon as Lei Dongqing and Madame Feng died, I knew those 2 old guys were up to no good. They've been using us along the way. But we were already halfway there. I couldn't advance or retreat on my own, let alone fall out with them, so I had no choice but to continue moving forward with them. Fortunately, we didn't encounter anything too dangerous later." "Then why did you come down from above? Were you plotted against by them?" "I jumped down on my own." Jing Xingji's expression was still indifferent even though he almost died on Demonic Mountain. It seemed he didn't hate Kumu and Tong Tianyun at all. Those 2 old guys actually made an appointment with several nascent soul seniors in front of Immortal's Ruins. It seemed they wanted to follow them to look for treasures. When they entered Immortal's Ruins, they left me outside. Not long after, a restriction in Immortal's Ruins collapsed. I don't know if it was triggered by them or not, but when I saw the situation wasn't good, I made up my mind and jumped down from above. In the end, I managed to save my life. "So that's what they were planning?" Shi mused. Jing Xingji turned his head and looked at him with a smile. "I say, fellow Daoist Shoujing, in any case we've been friends for more than 100 years. Now that we're in trouble together, you won't mind taking me with you when you go up, right?" Chapter 289. Mo Tiange was a little surprised. Did she guess Jing Xingji's intentions wrong? He was actually willing to act with them and didn't mind her low cultivation level? On second thought, the situation had changed. Jing Xingji didn't have anyone to cooperate with except them. Even if her cultivation level was a bit low, the 3 of them could go up and try their luck. She didn't look happy or angry. He just asked, "Fellow Daoist Jing, didn't you just come back with your life? Why do you still want to go up?" Jing Xingji touched his nose and said, "I had no choice but to go alone. Since I ran into you guys, of course I want to go back and see if I can get some benefits. After all, Immortal's Ruins isn't easy to go up." He blinked and said, "Hey, you're so sure you can take your junior martial sister away? In fact, you've been confident for a long time, right?" She didn't speak for a while. Judging from his expression, he wasn't unhappy, but he didn't agree immediately either. Mo Tiange looked at Jing Xingji and suddenly felt he was very familiar. Right, she also did this. Speaking of which, although their characters weren't compatible, their conversations always gave people a sense of familiarity. What kind of familiar relationship could they have? Their personalities were completely different, and they didn't agree with each other at all. "I'll say this first. When we get up there, the place we're going to is only a corner of Immortal's Ruins. If you want to go somewhere else, we definitely won't accompany you." Jing Xingji didn't care at all. "Whatever. All right, let's join hands." She said calmly, and Jing Xingji just smiled. The two of them didn't high-five or do anything equivalent to a promise. They just did their own things. This time the earthquake lasted for a whole day. By the time the mountain stabilized, the three of them were unbearably tired. Each of them used their strongest defensive means and were ready to attack at any time. Although it was more daunting than dangerous, they consumed a lot of spiritual aura. Moreover, there was also floating devil aura on the way, so they used up a lot of spiritual aura. The three of them rested in the small cave for a day. When they were full of spiritual aura, they continued to fly to the summit. With Jing Xingji's help, the journey was a lot easier. With Qin Shi's 3 Yang Real Fire Sword Formation, Mo Chenga's White Silk Handkerchief, and Jing Xingji's Protective Sword Light, they originally thought they would need more than a day to reach the summit, but they arrived in just one day. If not for the large amount of demonic energy released due to the collapse of the restriction at the summit, the three of them would not have dared to approach it. Perhaps they would have been even faster. Upon reaching the summit, Mo Chenga was dumbfounded. This is Immortals' ruins? There were rocks everywhere, spirits and demons mixed together. It was a barren wasteland. How could there be a word, celestial, here? Qin Shi said, the so-called Immortals' ruins is just what we, the later generations, call it. Demonic Mountain has been a battlefield since ancient times. Although it's said to bury all the immortals, it's actually just a place where all the immortals fell. Mo Chenga heaved a sigh. Before the immortals and demons were separated, the ones who died here were real immortals. Perhaps they would never be able to achieve such heights in their entire lives, but these immortals had only fallen to such a state. Jing Xingji grinned and said, don't underestimate this place. Even after so many years, there are still many treasures left behind by the immortals. It all depends on whether you have the opportunity to obtain them. Really? Looking into the distance, they couldn't see anything special except for one thing. The spiritual aura here was too strong. There was a transparent layer of spiritual aura floating in the sky, purer and cleaner than the spiritual aura they had seen before. In the area enveloped by this spiritual aura layer, the demonic aura could only move around the periphery. What's that? How come I've never seen such a special spiritual aura? It's immortal aura, Qin Shi said. Too many immortals died here. After they died, their bodies didn't remain. They all turned into immortal aura. I see. Alright, if you have something to say, you can talk about it later. It's time to get to work. Jing Xingji waved his hand. The flying sword on his back was unsheathed, ready to go, and he took the lead. Qin Shi also nodded at her. Let's go. Although there was no devil aura, immortal aura was equally terrifying. They were only cultivators, not immortals. The powerful power contained in immortal aura wasn't something they could withstand. Once their bodies were invaded by immortal aura, their bodies would explode and they would die. The three of them used all kinds of defensive methods and cautiously entered the rubble. Before they arrived at tens of thousands of feet peak, they could occasionally see skeletons in some places, but on this peak, it was completely clean. After immortals died, even their bones wouldn't be left behind. They would directly turn into immortal aura. There were many traces left behind by spells in the surroundings. Even after 1,000,000 years, these traces could still be clearly distinguished. Because immortals had the ability to move mountains and drain seas, the power of their spells was too great, so the traces left behind were naturally spectacular. For example, this tens of thousands of feet peak was originally connected to other peaks, but it was cut off by some kind of immortal weapon, turning it into a lone peak. It wasn't easy for them to even take a stone off this tens of thousands of feet peak, but for immortals they could easily split it. There was also a huge lake on this peak. Upon a closer look, it was actually a trace left behind by a water spell. After 1,000,000 years, it actually still existed. There were also the rubble, the blackened traces, and the huge holes. All of them were traces left behind by spells. Although she didn't see the remains of immortals, Mo Chenga clearly saw that magnificent battle 1,000,000 years ago. This gave her a wonderful feeling as if she was personally experiencing that battle, seeing spells flying everywhere and immortal weapons crisscrossing. Qin Shi walked very slowly on purpose, as if he was deliberately letting her experience this feeling. Jing Xingji wore a rare solemn expression as he silently watched the scene in front of him. The three people's almost leisurely advancing speed was disrupted by the sudden attack. Jing Xingji, who was walking in the front, suddenly stepped on something. A slight click sound was heard, and then a burst of light smoke rose. Jing Xingji's reaction was also very fast. His flying sword flew out at lightning speed and he leaped into the air, barely dodging a flash of lightning. Mo Chenga and Qin Shi instantly flew away. Qin Shi's 3 Yang Real Fire Sword immediately counterattacked. Emochenga waved her hand, and the white silk handkerchief turned into a wisp of light smoke twining around him. At the same time she held a magic weapon in her hand, ready to attack at any time. Soon after, the three people were stunned. Because it wasn't a demonic beast, nor was it a restriction but a wisp of light smoke? Jing Xingji's sword light had already pierced it, and Qin Shi's three-young real fire sword also instantly emitted a fiery red light. However, this wisp of light smoke was split apart and instantly gathered again. What's this? Jing Xingji looked at Qin Shi in astonishment. Did you see it last time? Qin Shi shook his head. I also don't know. Emochenga naturally didn't know either. Just as they spoke, that wisp of light smoke slowly rushed towards them. The three people didn't dare to be careless and retreated. Emochenga's speed was slightly slower, so she felt a pain in her arm. She looked down and saw that wherever the wisp of light smoke floated past, a part of the white silk handkerchief's fog was corroded, and a part of her sleeve was also scorched. Qin Shi stepped forward and pulled her. After retreating a certain distance, he pulled up her sleeve, only to see that her originally smooth arm was also scorched black. Qin Shi's expression changed. Does it hurt? Emochenga frowned and said, let's not worry about it for now. What should we do with this thing? Jing Xingji glanced at her with that faint smile on his face and said, my flying sword can't cut it and my magic can't burn it. What else can we do? We can only run. As soon as he finished speaking, he rode his flying sword and ran away madly. Qin Shi shook his head. In the next moment he flung his sleeve, summoned his flying cloud and pulled Emochenga to escape. That wisp of light smoke caught up with them. It wasn't slow, but both Jing Xingji's flying sword and Qin Shi's flying cloud were extremely fast. Before long, that wisp of light smoke finally stopped chasing them. The three people stopped and all heaved sighs of relief. What kind of strange thing is this? Jing Xingji muttered. No one answered him. Qin Shi pulled Emochenga's sleeve and looked at her skin corroded by the wisp of light smoke. He frowned and said, something's wrong. This thing? At first she only felt a little pain, but now Emochenga felt a burning pain. Moreover, this kind of pain was getting worse and worse. She originally endured it, but in the end she couldn't bear it anymore. She grabbed Qin Shi's sleeve, sweating profusely. It hurts a lot. Qin Shi knew her temperament. If it wasn't really painful, she definitely wouldn't scream, so he immediately took out a medicinal pill from his chinkuan bag. Eat this. Emochenga swallowed it as he said and felt a little better. Qin Shi pressed her arm and slowly released his spiritual aura. Starting from the wound, he carefully examined it bit by bit. What's wrong? Is there something strange about this thing? Jing Xingji asked. Qin Shi didn't say anything. After a while he suddenly made a hand seal. A string of real fire came out of his palm and stuck to the scorched area. Emochenga shivered. His real fire wasn't an ordinary cultivator's real fire. He originally cultivated a fire element cultivation technique, and his body also had pure yang spiritual aura. When it burned, her arm, which was already numb, felt another kind of pain. Qin Shi noticed it. He paused for a moment, then used his yang spiritual aura to surround the real fire and slowly burned it. The pain eased a little, and Emochenga slowly felt the yang spiritual aura enter her body. She didn't need to use it herself. The yin spiritual aura in her body followed it, and the two of them converged. Qin Shi's real fire was surrounded by yin and yang spiritual aura and slowly burned it. After a long time, the scorched area finally began to shrink. By the time the scorched area disappeared from Emochenga's arm, most of their spiritual aura had been consumed. Jing Xingji didn't understand what happened. Now that they stopped, he asked, what's going on? Your real fire can burn it, but why didn't it work just now? Qin Shi said, this is the extreme yang real fire I comprehended when I formed my nascent soul. It's different from the real fire on the three yang real fire sword. Then why didn't you use it just now? This question made Qin Shi snort. That's easy for you to say. It's very troublesome to mobilize this real fire. The smoke was too fast, I couldn't do it in time. Oh, I see. Jing Xingji nodded. Since you can heal, I'm relieved. Don't be happy too early. Qin Shi glanced at him indifferently. If it were you, I wouldn't be able to help. Jing Xingji was puzzled. What? Qin Shi didn't answer. He just shook his head and said to Emochenga, rest for a while and restore your spiritual aura. His extreme yang real fire was very overbearing. If it weren't for his and Emochenga's yin and yang spiritual aura acting as a buffer, Emochenga's hand would have been burned before she could burn the black aura. Chapter 290. Mo Chenga and Qin Shi took turns to meditate, leaving one person on guard. Clearly they didn't trust Jing Xingji. Jing Xingji was bored, so he said he was going to look around. When his figure disappeared, Qin Shi, who was meditating, suddenly opened his eyes and said, "This brat is also dishonest." Although Qin Shi's attitude had always been very clear that he didn't like Jing Xingji, he seemed to be very familiar with Jing Xingji. For example, if he wasn't familiar with Jing Xingji, he would never call him brat. Mo Chenga asked, "What's your relationship with him? I always feel that although you two don't talk much, you know each other very well." Qin Shi smiled and said, "Of course I know him. I've known him for more than 100 years, even earlier than Kumu and the others." "Why is that?" Qin Shi didn't answer immediately. Instead, he asked her with a smile, "Why don't you guess?" Mo Chenga thought for a while and said, "You said he was a disciple of venerable swordsman Zhongguang from Gujin sect. Unfortunately, his master died early, so he wasn't very successful in Gujin sect. Presumably, when his master was still alive, he was also a proud son of heaven, right?" Qin Shi nodded. "Yes." Mo Chenga said, "Judging from his age, he seems to be about the same as you, so the difference should be no more than 100 years. Since the two of you are about the same age and both are proud disciples of nascent soul cultivators from big sects, it's not too much to say you're the same kind of people. Did you meet because of that?" Qin Shi just smiled and pulled her to sit next to him. "Did I guess right or not?" "You're half right." Qin Shi paused and said slowly, "In fact, when I met him, I didn't know his identity. Could it be that the two of you met each other when you were traveling?" "Yes. At that time, I was in the middle stage of the foundation building realm and so was he." "So early?" Mo Chenga was a little surprised. Middle stage of the foundation building realm. Wasn't he only in his 30s or 40s? Qin Shi smiled and opened his left hand. With a dazzling golden light, the three-yang real fire sword appeared in his hand. He looked at the sword and said with emotion, "In the blink of an eye, it's been more than 150 years. Back then, I obtained the method to refine the sword and the cultivation technique together with him. We even encountered the yang spiritual bead at that time." "What?" Upon seeing Mo Chenga's incredulous expression, Qin Shi sheathed his sword and slowly explained in detail, "At that time, I hadn't entered the middle stage of the foundation building realm for long. One time when I was outside, I happened to enter a place called Mount Lang with someone else. That place was very strange. This mountain was surrounded by excellent high-grade spirit veins, but it didn't have even the slightest bit of spiritual aura." "No spiritual aura?" A thought flashed through Mo Chenga's mind. She asked, "Is it because of the yang spiritual bead?" Qin Shi nodded with a smile. "Yes. It was said that a long time ago, there was an ancient immortal's cave here. So many people came here to search for treasures. At first, I didn't believe this rumor, but I also felt that this place was strange. So I went with the others. Who would have thought that when we arrived, an immortal's cave really did appear in the middle of Mount Lang. Mount Lang immediately became a living hell. Low-level cultivators swarmed in and high-level cultivators appeared frequently." He was lost in thought for a while before continuing, "Too many people died at that time. In the end, those high-level cultivators had the upper hand and occupied the cave. At that time my cultivation level was still low, so I naturally didn't fight with them. I just secretly sent a message to my master, telling him about the situation here. Then I happened to meet Jing Xingji. Just like me, he happened to escape a calamity. We were in the same situation and we were in trouble together, so we naturally joined hands." "What happened next?" "Since you obtained the method to refine the three-yang real fire sword and the yang spiritual bead, presumably Jing Xingji also obtained some benefits, right?" Qin Shi said faintly, "The sword in his hand is an ancient cultivation sword. It's extremely powerful. Our luck was good. It turns out that there was an ancient cultivation sect hidden in Mount Lang. The Immortal's Cave didn't count for much, but we found the real treasure trove. This ancient cultivation group seemed to have been exterminated in the end, leaving behind a lot of treasures. I guess the reason they were exterminated was probably because of the existence of the yang spiritual bead. All the spirit veins in the mountain were sucked dry, so this cultivation group naturally couldn't continue to exist." Mo Chenga sighed with emotion. "In that case, the two of you are the biggest winners of this trip." Qin Shi smiled. "It's not our turn. We managed to save our lives with great difficulty. Later, Master finally arrived and venerable swordsman Zhongguang also happened to come. It was only then that we found out the other party's identity. In the end, the treasures in Mount Lang were divided among several big cultivation groups. The benefits Jing Xingji and I obtained couldn't be considered much. That was true. An entire ancient cultivation group had countless treasures. Presumably, they were only a few more than the collections of the 7 big cultivation groups. Even if many of them couldn't be used anymore, they were still a huge fortune. But even so, I really don't have a good impression of this person. He's much more trustworthy than Kumu and the others, but after venerable swordsman Zhongguang passed away, he suffered a lot of unfair treatment and attached great importance to benefits. I don't like this kind of character. Mo Chenga nodded. Moreover, he's frivolous. He's not the same kind of person as us. Upon hearing what she said, she smiled and tightened his grip on her hand. Jing Xingji had been flirting with her on the way. Although he didn't take it seriously, he always felt uncomfortable. Now that he heard what she said, he felt all the knots in his heart disappeared. How could the woman he fancied be like those superficial people who only looked at appearances? Even if Jing Xingji's face was like a peach blossom and his tongue was like honey, she still wouldn't like him. The two of them were silently enjoying a moment of peace when Mo Chenga suddenly remembered something. Has your spiritual aura recovered? She nodded. I have the yang spiritual bead, so my spiritual aura recovers much faster. I've been fine for a long time. Mo Chenga paused for a moment and suddenly understood. In other words, he deliberately let Jing Xingji leave just now to avoid talking to me? Thinking up to this point, Mo Chenga felt her face burning. She coughed and said, Let's talk about it later, she said. When I said this boy wasn't honest, I didn't just say it casually. Mo Chenga was stunned. What did you see? She snorted and said, with his character, if he didn't have certain benefits, he wouldn't have followed us to Immortal's ruins. I'm sure his original purpose was here. Mo Chenga knew nothing about Jing Xingji's character, so she couldn't say anything. However, she was never a person who talked nonsense. Since he said it, he must have his reasons. If that's the case, won't he implicate us? She shook his head. Let's wait and see. Although he and I aren't friends, we've been friends for more than 100 years. He's a person who values benefits, but he won't stab us in the back. At most, he'll tell us to pray for our own luck. Mo Chenga nodded. You believe him and I believe you. Upon hearing this, she smiled and said softly, when we go back, we'll report it to Master, okay? Mo Chenga naturally understood the meaning of his words, but she was a bit hesitant. Let's talk about it later. She was stunned. What? Didn't she agree? Mo Chenga looked away and avoided his gaze. When we go back, you'll enter closed-door meditation to form your nascent soul, right? This was almost certain. He already said that he failed to form his nascent soul 3 times because he missed her. He tried everything he could but couldn't get rid of her. Now that they were committed, with his character, he'd naturally go back to form his nascent soul. Of course, she said, when we find your father's corpse, we can go back. Now that everything is ready, we won't have to worry about forming our nascent soul. Seeing that she didn't speak, She's expression slowly darkened. Chenga, what are you thinking? Why do I feel like I still can't understand you? You're not willing to rely on me too much so I can understand you. But now we're all ready. Don't you want to perform dual cultivation with me? Mo Chenga was stunned for a while before she said, I just think now isn't the right time. You want to form your nascent soul so you naturally can't be distracted. As for me, I also need some time to adapt to core formation. Let's take it slow. She didn't say anything, but his gaze revealed his displeasure. After a while, he said, I originally didn't plan to perform dual cultivation before I formed my nascent soul, but I don't want to wait anymore. What? Mo Chenga couldn't help but ask, isn't it good for us to be like this now? She asked too quickly as if she was unwilling, so She's expression didn't look good. He calmed down and asked, then, after we go back, are you willing to move to my immortal's cave? Mo Chenga was stunned. You have to enter closed-door meditation to form your nascent soul, and I might also enter closed-door meditation during this period of time. This isn't necessary, right? She smiled with a hint of self-mockery. You see, you're always so restrained, which gives me the illusion that you don't have that many feelings. Sometimes I feel strange. How can there be a woman like you? So calm that people feel you're heartless. This obviously wasn't a compliment. His tone even carried a hint of complaint. People were always strange like this. He hoped to have a quiet and rational woman who wouldn't affect his cultivation, but she was too quiet and rational, which made him feel unreconciled. He always felt he wasn't that important in her heart. Mo Chenga didn't refute him. She was silent for a while, then said slowly, I thought about it a long time ago. We're cultivators, so we're different from mortals. Even if we live together, so what? Cultivators spend most of their long lives in closed-door meditation. How much time do we really have together? Maybe not as much as mortal couples. That being the case, why should we be in such a hurry? Yes, you're right. However, there's a way to solve this. Mo Chenga was puzzled. What way? We practice the same cultivation technique, Qin said. With our constitutions, dual cultivation is better than others. If we practice the same cultivation technique, our progress will definitely be amazing. Mo Chenga was shocked. You mean we should give up our current cultivation technique and practice dual cultivation? Mo Chenga once again fell silent after receiving confirmation. Dual cultivation techniques were cultivation techniques that Tao companions practicing dual cultivation together practiced. The most famous dual cultivation group in the celestial pole was Biyun sect, one of the 7 great cultivation groups. Most of the disciples of Biyun sect practiced dual cultivation techniques, and only when a man and a woman practiced dual cultivation together could they achieve miraculous results. However, they were different. She and Qin each had their own special cultivation techniques. Her Sunu art of the origin, while his art of 3 primordial cycles and pure yang technique had already reached a certain realm. Furthermore, they were very compatible with each other's constitutions. With their current situation, they usually cultivated separately. Occasionally being together was enough for the cycle of yin and yang. It would be a pity if they gave up. We don't have a suitable cultivation technique. Besides, if we did that, wouldn't my spiritual roots of the origin be meaningless? This is different, Qin said firmly. Just tell me if you agree or not. If you agree, I'll take care of these things. Chapter 291. I don't know. After a long time, Mo Chenga sighed and said, I always feel that you walk too fast and think too fast. I can't keep up with your footsteps. Qin was stunned. He was silent. The two of them sat in silence for a while, experiencing this feeling in their hearts. They both had their own opinions. Since they embarked on the path of cultivation, they never stopped for others and never accommodated to other people's ideas. Once they decided what to do, they would walk according to their own ideas. But it was different now. They had to adapt to another person's footsteps and take into consideration another person's ideas. Some things couldn't be the same as before. Let me think about it, she said. Qin answered softly. It's not that I don't agree or anything. After a while, Mo Chenga said slowly, it's just, I'm not used to this feeling. Do you understand? After a while, Qin nodded. I understand. After a while, he held her hand and smiled. Do you think I'm too anxious? That I didn't give you time to adapt? A little bit, Mo Chenga said, slowly thinking about the feeling in her heart. It's too fast. I can't adapt. Besides, I think we both have our own ideas about cultivation. Why don't we continue according to our original plan? You want to form your nascent soul, so you'll definitely enter closed-door meditation when you go back. As for me, I have to refine my natal magic weapon and study core formation cultivation techniques to slowly adapt to some things in the core formation stage. Now isn't the time for us to be carefree. If we change our current lives too hastily, won't we mess up our pace? Seeing that Qin's face finally brightened, she smiled. You said we'll practice the same cultivation technique, but I think there are still many problems to solve. First, there's the gap between our cultivation levels. If we perform dual cultivation after you form your nascent soul, it'll naturally be beneficial for me, but it's not a good choice for you. But if you don't form your nascent soul because of this, it's even worse. You're already in the peak stage of the core formation realm. If we continue to waste time, it'll only be a waste of time. She paused and looked at Qin's expression. Qin nodded. You're right. Second, our constitutions and spiritual roots are both special. If we choose dual cultivation, won't we be able to make full use of each other's characteristics? Otherwise, wouldn't all of this be meaningless? Qin nodded again. You're right. But his expression was too calm, making Mo Chenga rather confused. Then what do you think? Qin smiled. He put his arm around her waist and leaned on her shoulder, not saying anything for a long time. Mo Chenga crawled out of the room unwillingly. You clearly know I'm anxious to know, yet you still won't tell me? So you're also anxious. Qin said with a nod. You know that's not what I meant. The heavy atmosphere changed again after he said that. Qin smiled. It was unknown whether it was because he was proud of himself or because he was amused. After a long time, he finally said leisurely, "Everything you said makes sense, but am I someone without a plan?" Only then did Qinshi's expression turn serious. He said, "Rest assured I'm not talking nonsense. After we go back I'll slowly tell you what happened in detail." Upon seeing his expression and hearing his words, Chenga was confused. "Is there something I don't know?" Qinshi pursed his lips and smiled, but he didn't answer. "Why aren't you telling me?" Chenga didn't want to give up and urged him. "Now isn't the time to talk." Qinshi suddenly looked away. "You." Just as she was about to continue asking, she suddenly saw Jing Xingji walking towards them from the corner of her eye. She hastily let go of his hand, feeling remorseful in her heart. She found that her vigilance had decreased. Her divine sense was clearly observing the surroundings, but she actually didn't notice Jing Xingji was so close to her. Or did Jing Xingji have some special means? This wasn't strange. He was already in the late stage of the core formation realm and was very strong. Maybe he had some means that prevented her divine sense from noticing him. Although she let go of his hand a long time ago, Jing Xingji had already seen it. Now that he came back, his gaze swept over them and he suddenly said to Qinshi, "No wonder you were so rude to me this time." "So that's why," Qinshi snorted. "It's good that you know." Jing Xingji smiled and glanced at Tiange with his peach blossom eyes. "Why didn't you say it earlier? If you said it, I naturally wouldn't make you unhappy. Why didn't you say it? Or were you too embarrassed to say it?" Qinshi's expression darkened. "Since you've rested enough, let's continue?" "Ha." Jing Xingji chuckled, but his expression turned serious again. "I still want to say, Qin Shoujing, you also have this day." Right after he said that, he walked away with a complacent expression. "Wait." Qinshi frowned and said, "I'll walk in front." Jing Xingji nodded indifferently and retreated to the back. If they encountered that kind of situation again, he wouldn't be able to save her if he was careless and got hit. If it was Qinshi, as he said, it would be easier to deal with. The three of them continued to move forward in silence. Jing Xingji really restrained himself and didn't try to seduce Tiange again, intentionally or otherwise. Tiange also heaved a sigh of relief. After walking for a while, Tiange suddenly said, "Wait." The other two people stopped. Qinshi turned around. "What's wrong?" Tiange carefully looked at the surrounding scenery, then said with a frown, "Don't you think our surroundings haven't changed at all?" Both Qinshi and Jing Xingji frowned and looked around. Tiange said slowly, "That's not right. Our surroundings have changed, but the changes are very subtle and almost unrecognizable." As she said that, she turned around again and her expression darkened. "Can you tell where we came from?" Qinshi and Jing Xingji turned around and their expressions changed. As far as they could see, the scenery was almost the same. They actually couldn't tell where they came from. The three of them stood for a while. Jing Xingji asked, "Qin Shoujing, is there a maze formation here?" Qinshi shook his head. "I don't know." "You don't know?" Jing Xingji didn't believe him. "You actually don't know? Didn't your master tell you?" Qinshi withdrew his gaze and said, "My master said it's not strange for anything to appear in Immortal's ruins. Even if we didn't encounter anything this time, every time we came here there would be subtle changes." He then turned around and asked Tiange, "You're more proficient in formations. What do you think?" During this time, Tiange had been observing the changes around her. Her eyes, divine sense and ears hadn't relaxed at all. Upon hearing his question, she just shook her head and said, "This isn't a formation." "What?" Jing Xingji and Qinshi didn't dare to believe it. A similar scene, a confusing scene. These weren't caused by a maze formation? Tiange said, "There must be a formation position for a formation. But use your divine sense to observe. Are there any spiritual aura fluctuations around here?" Upon hearing that, the two of them released their divine senses. After a while, their expressions became more and more solemn. Even if their formations weren't good enough, they still noticed something was wrong. The spiritual aura fluctuations around here were so weak. After all, this was Immortal's ruins. The sky above Immortal's ruins was covered with a lot of immortal aura, so how could the spiritual aura here be so weak? "Then what do you think it might be?" "I don't know." Tiange looked confused. "It's very strange. This doesn't conform to the way of formations, so it's not a formation. But there's no hallucinogenic thing around." "I'm also confused." Qinshi nodded. "The things in Immortal's ruins are far beyond our cultivation levels, so it's not strange that you don't know." The three of them were silent. After a while, Jing Xingji asked, "Then what should we do? We can't just stand here, right? Should we go or not?" Qinshi thought about it and said, Keep going. If they didn't go, they would really be trapped here. Okay. Jing Xingji didn't have any objections. He was also a bold person. Mo Chenga naturally didn't object. But after walking for a while, she felt something was wrong. Why is there such a thick fog? Mo Chenga asked curiously. The fog was not only getting thicker, but it also smelled very choking. No one answered her. She didn't care. She rubbed her nose and kept walking. But after a few more steps, she immediately stopped. Something was wrong. This time something was really wrong. There was no one around her. Upon discovering this, Mo Chenga immediately spread her divine sense. However, for some unknown reason, this fog actually blocked her divine sense from reaching her. After standing in place for a while, Mo Chenga calmed down, then raised her voice and shouted, "Senior Marshal Brother? Senior Marshal Brother?" Still no one answered her. Her voice even echoed in the distance. At this moment, Mo Chenga felt her hair stand on end. The two cultivators walking in front and behind her, one in the peak stage of the core formation realm and the other in the late stage, didn't hide their breaths. What kind of power did they have? Her divine sense was very sharp, so she was always paying attention to her surroundings. But just now, these two cultivators suddenly disappeared, and she didn't even notice them before and after they disappeared. This was too terrifying. She forced herself to calm down. This was wrong, very wrong. She had to think, right? When she asked, she paid attention to the fog around her for a split second. After that split second, the two powerful breaths disappeared, and she didn't feel anything abnormal. The fog here. Thinking of this, Mo Chenga immediately searched her Chenkuan bag, took out a jade bottle and swallowed a medicinal pill. This was a heart-clearing pill which had the effect of calming the mind. Generally speaking, taking one when one's mind was in a mess would help calm the mind. After thinking for a while, she swallowed another refreshing pill in case this fog was poisonous. Then she sat cross-legged on the ground and calmed her mind. There was definitely something wrong with this fog. It could numb a cultivator's divine sense unconsciously. Otherwise, with the sharpness of her divine sense, there was no reason she couldn't sense Qin Shi and Jing Xingji's disappearance. But now, the two of them suddenly disappeared without a trace and she actually didn't notice them at all. She had to restore the sharpness of her divine sense to find the two people who disappeared. Time passed bit by bit. Mo Chenga was startled awake when a hand pressed on her shoulder. "What's wrong?" Jing Xingji looked at her with a frown. She was stunned. She turned around to look for Qin Shi, but Jing Xingji said, "No need to look. I looked for a long time and only saw you sitting here. I don't know where Qin Shoujing is." Chapter 292. She was separated from Qin Shi. Upon realizing this, Mo Chenga heaved a sigh. There were so many strange things in Immortal's ruins that she had to think about every step she took. Under such circumstances, it was really difficult to move forward without someone she could trust. Jing Xingji was a person Qin Shi thought was generally trustworthy, but that wasn't necessarily true for her. This person was a typical utilitarian. Even though he was used to fawning over women and had thrown her countless flirtatious glances along the way, in the depths of his heart, he only used strength to measure strength. If there was any possibility of her dragging him down, he would unceremoniously leave her behind. Thinking of this, Mo Chenga cheered up. In any case, she had to persevere and find Qin Shi. "Fellow Taoist Jing, what do you think about the current situation?" Upon hearing her question, Jing Xingji still looked lazy and said, "There's something wrong with this fog." Nonsense, she also knew there was something wrong. Seeing that Jing Xingji was just dealing with her, Mo Chenga said bluntly, "With fellow Taoist Jing's experience, you should know more than this, right?" Jing Xingji smiled and glanced at her. "I also know that this fog has a great impact on divine senses. Fellow Taoist Qingwei, your divine sense can't play any role here." Mo Chenga's eyes moved, but she didn't say anything. Jing Xingji's current attitude was very clear. He wanted to see if she had a way. If she had a way, he might try his best. If she didn't, he probably didn't want to carry a burden. Realizing this, Mo Chenga lowered her head and pondered. "Fog. Divine sense. All of a sudden." She asked, "Fellow Taoist Jing, when we were separated just now, what did you feel?" Jing Xingji thought for a while, then said, I didn't feel anything. It was like I was lost in thought for a while, and when I turned around, I found you were gone." Mo Chenga nodded. "It seems this fog can paralyze our divine senses and make our senses wrong." Jing Xingji nodded carelessly. Mo Chenga said, "I'm afraid it's more than that. Even if it paralyzes our divine senses, there's no reason we can't find them by the time we react. Perhaps it can even mislead our senses. Upon hearing this, Jing Xingji took another look at her. Mo Qianga didn't understand the meaning behind his gaze, so she continued to say, "That being the case, we can't trust our divine senses and senses." Jing Xingji chuckled. "That being the case, does fellow Taoist Qingwei have a solution?" His attitude was very casual. Obviously, he didn't think Mo Qianga could solve the current situation. Without saying anything, Mo Qianga took out a flying sword from her Chengkuan bag, then lowered her head and started to carve something on the ground. In fact, Jing Xingji knew very well in his heart that Qin had high standards. Since this junior martial sister of his was accepted as Lord Taoist Jinghe's disciple and also received special treatment from him, she definitely had some outstanding qualities. Jing Xingji didn't believe that guy, Qin Shoujing, would take a fancy to an idiot. However, he also didn't think too highly of Mo Qianga because the so-called title of genius was too exaggerated. People who cultivated fast might not necessarily be strong, and people with high comprehension might not necessarily be quick-witted. But when he saw what Mo Qianga drew on the ground, his expression turned serious. "This is..." Mo Qianga put away her flying sword and took out a sound-transmitting jade talisman from her robe. This jade talisman was a 1,000-mile sound-transmitting talisman. It was prepared to be used when they were separated, but she didn't have many of them, so she didn't use them immediately when they were separated to avoid wasting them in the fog. The sound-transmitting jade talisman ignited with a fiery red light. It was about to break through the sky and fly away, but it fell again after flying only several feet. Jing Xingji was disappointed. Even the sound-transmitting talisman doesn't work? Mo Qianga was only stunned for a moment. She then continued to draw her flying sword and carve on the ground. What she drew was the position of an ancient 8 trigrams formation diagram, which came from the Xuanji formation book. In the fog, the naked eye could only see several feet ahead. If they walked casually, they would be like a headless fly, unable to distinguish directions. If they walked according to this 8 trigrams formation diagram, they would at least know which direction they were going and wouldn't go astray. Even if it was a dead end, they could go back the way they came. After she finished drawing the formation diagram, Mo Qianga carefully examined the surrounding scenery. After confirming there was no danger, she chose a direction and took the lead. Jing Xingji lowered his head to look at the formation diagram she drew. Without saying anything, he followed her. This time the two of them didn't get separated. Since they knew the fog could paralyze divine senses, the two of them were very careful. After walking for a while, Mo Qianga once again drew the formation diagram and repeated the process several times. Since the sound-transmitting talisman couldn't be used, she could only leave an imprint. Although she couldn't be considered proficient in formations, he should be able to recognize her words. If he saw her, he could follow the formation diagram to find her, and the two of them could reunite. Just like that, she and Jing Xingji walked further and further away from each other. She soon realized he was lost. Moreover, when he turned around, Mo Qianga and Jing Xingji were nowhere to be seen. He didn't panic. He unfolded the 3-yang real fire sword and circled around his body. He then closed his eyes and spread his divine sense. But soon he discovered he couldn't spread his divine sense, and he couldn't even use the sound-transmitting talisman. Realizing his situation, she thought for a while and did the same thing as Mo Qianga. He took medicinal pills and meditated. Unfortunately, during this period of time when he was calm, no one came to pat him on the shoulder. After a long time, he opened his eyes and found his divine sense still couldn't spread in the fog. It seemed the fog itself was blocking his divine sense, not his divine sense being disturbed by the fog. He sat for a while, but the solution he chose was completely different from Mo Qianga's. He wasn't good at formations, so he didn't think of using formations as a mark. Instead, he waved his sleeves and brandished the sword light of the 3-yang real fire sword, burning the fog. Under the pressure of the fiery red sword light, the fog dispersed, but when he stopped for a moment, it swept over again. She stopped. This fog was very similar to the light smoke just now. Although it wasn't corrosive, it wasn't afraid of his sword light either. After thinking for a while, he straightened the sword and wiped the sword with 2 fingers of his right hand. Blood flowed out, emitting a dazzling light. He didn't tell Jing Xingji the truth. Extreme yang real fire could be used to defend against enemies. The 3-yang real fire sword once again brandished the sword light. Under the extreme yang real fire, the fog was finally burned away bit by bit, and a bright view appeared. She stopped using the extreme yang real fire sword and cautiously walked forward. He hadn't walked far when he suddenly heard a loud rumble. She listened attentively and his expression changed. This was the sound of fighting. Moreover, the sound wasn't small, it was at least a nascent soul cultivator. He only thought for a moment before he used his body technique and ran toward the source of the sound. He had been separated from Immerse, but he was sure she wasn't too far away. The sound was too loud, so Immerse would definitely hear it. At that time, the two of them could meet at the source of the sound. After flying for a while, the fog around him became thinner and thinner without him noticing, and he finally ran out of the scope of the fog. But this didn't make Qinshi feel relieved, because as soon as he came out of the fog, he was locked on by several divine senses. This place was a huge crater. It was said that this crater was left behind by the immortals of the distant past era who used some earth-shattering fire magic art. For millions of years, the fire had never been extinguished. There was also a legend that the fire in this volcano was comparable to the Samadhi real fire, one of the three great real fires. Unfortunately, for so many years, no one had ever been able to take away the real fire. Now there were two groups of 4 nascent soul cultivators standing on the edge of this crater. There were 3 people on one side, and there was only one cultivator wrapped in black aura on the other side. Qinshi glanced at them and frowned because the nascent soul cultivator standing alone was the number 1 late-stage nascent soul cultivator in the celestial pole, Master Song Feng. Although he looked calm, he was complaining in his heart. He wasn't afraid of other nascent soul cultivators. After all, he was Lord Daoist Jinghe's disciple and his cultivation level wasn't bad, so others would always give him some face. Even if they didn't give him face, he could always run away if he couldn't defeat them. But this Master Song Feng was an anomaly. This person had a grudge against both his master and himself, and he was also very skilled. When he left Mount Taikang last time, he was almost killed by Master Song Feng. If he hadn't launched a secret technique in time and the nascent soul cultivators from his school hadn't come to greet him, he would have lost his life. Now they met this person on Demonic Mountain. He just hoped Tinga wouldn't come. Otherwise, it would be even more difficult for the two of them to escape. Oh. Master Song Feng was quite surprised to see him, but then he chuckled and said, "God treats me well today. Qin Shoujing, you little kid actually delivered yourself to my door." At that moment, Qinshi's gaze swept over the 3 nascent soul cultivators in front of Master Song Feng, and his heart settled. The 3 nascent soul cultivators were all in the middle stage of the nascent soul realm. One was a young female cultivator, one was a middle-aged scholar, and the last was a handsome Taoist. He knew all 3 of them. The young female cultivator and the middle-aged scholar were wearing elegant white clothes with green hairpins and clouds embroidered on their cuffs. They were a pair of Tao companions from Biyun sect. The female cultivator was called Ding Luan, and the scholar was called Feng Xiao. They were known as the Luan and Feng immortal couple in the celestial pole. They were the only pair of Tao companions whose cultivation levels were above the middle stage of the nascent soul realm, so they were very famous. The handsome Taoist was surnamed Ji, and people called him Taoist Priest Ji. He was from Tiandao sect. These 3 people all had some friendship with his master, and their relationship was passable. Judging from the current situation, they had already fallen out with Master Song Feng, so they would more or less protect him. Thinking up to this point, he smiled slightly and didn't pay attention to Master Song Feng. Instead, he politely saluted the 3 nascent soul cultivators. "Senior Ding, Senior Feng, Senior Ji, it's been a long time since we last met. Seniors, are you all well?" Seeing that he was so polite, Ding Luan smiled and said, "Qin brat, why are you also here? Where's your master?" Qinshi was already 200 years old. Among core formation cultivators he could be considered young, but he wasn't old enough to be called brat, casually. Ding Luan, on the other hand, looked like she was in her prime, but her real age was 700 or 800 years old. Calling him brat was an act of respect. Qinshi said, "Junior came to Demonic Mountain this time on the orders of my master. My master isn't far away and will arrive soon." He naturally made this up to tell Master Song Feng that his master was here. Upon hearing what he said, Master Song Feng snorted coldly. "Qin Shoujing, do you think I'll believe you just because you say it casually? It's best that you delivered yourself to my door today. After I get rid of the 3 of them, I'll also get rid of you to avenge my poor disciple." Before Qinshi could answer, Feng Xiao already sneered and said, "Old Song Feng, aren't you afraid that the wind will sprain your tongue? Do you really think you're the number 1 cultivator in the celestial pole and invincible? You're just one person. Although our cultivation levels are lower than yours, we're not to be trifled with." Ah! Black aura surged on Master Song Feng's body, and he said in a contemptuous tone, "What, Luan and Feng immortal couple? I really don't care. Who's the one who sprained his tongue? Chapter 293. Old Song Feng, Ding Wan said with a smile, but her tone was contemptuous. If I were you, I would have gone into hiding a long time ago, but you're still so proud of yourself. Aren't you afraid of being laughed at by all the cultivators in the world? Ding Wan looked gentle, but her words were very rude. Master Song Feng, who was used to being scolded, was angry now. He sneered and said, "Laughed at by all the cultivators in the world? Woman surnamed Ding, why don't you drag them out and scold them for me to hear? Why are you still talking nonsense here? You're the one who likes to talk nonsense, not me." Ding Wan's tongue was like a knife, but she kept smiling. "Do you really think those kids think you're the #1 cultivator in the celestial pole? I've seen people who think highly of themselves, but I've never seen anyone who thinks so highly of themselves like you. Let's not talk about the past. Let's see if this Qin brat takes you seriously or not." Qin, she smiled bitterly in his heart. Although he had a grudge against Master Song Feng, he wasn't arrogant enough to think he could escape from a great late-stage nascent soul cultivator with his own strength. Right now, he wanted to use the presence of the 3 nascent soul cultivators to dilute his sense of existence, but this senior Ding pushed him out to attract Master Song Feng's attention. However, he couldn't blame Ding Wan. For Lord Taoist Jinghe's sake, Ding Wan was willing to protect him, which was already good enough. Master Song Feng's figure hidden in the black aura couldn't be seen clearly, but he glanced at them fiercely and said, "Woman Ding, don't talk nonsense. Since you're not willing to give way, don't blame me for being ruthless." As he spoke, his whole body merged into the black aura and suddenly attacked the 3 people. Although their words were full of contempt, the 3 people didn't dare to underestimate Master Song Feng's attack. Ding Wan and Feng Xiao both retreated at the same time, using their teleportation techniques and magic weapons. Both of their magic weapons were musical instruments. Ding Wan held the zither and Feng Xiao held the flute, instantly spreading a thick music net. Master Song Feng's black aura looked fierce, but it was blocked by this music net. Upon seeing this, Taoist Ji smiled faintly. He took out a huge wine gourd from his bosom and took a sip leisurely. All of a sudden, he opened his mouth, and the fine wine in his mouth shot out like an arrow towards Master Song Feng's black aura. Master Song Feng withdrew the devil aura all over his body and swiftly retreated. Although his words were arrogant and his methods were ruthless, he was not an arrogant person. Although he said that he looked down on the Wan and Phoenix immortal couple, he understood in his heart that the couple's cultivation was not bad and their teamwork was quite good. Their fighting strength was not inferior to a late-stage cultivator, so he could not take them lightly. What's more, there was Taoist Ji next to him. Taoist Ji didn't like to talk, and some people even said that he was a mute. However, when he made a move, he was extremely sharp. He often set up hidden traps and people would unknowingly fall into his trap. Therefore, even though his tone was arrogant, he didn't dare to be careless in his heart and was extremely cautious. However, since he had already made his move, there was no reason for him to stop. As soon as they saw Master Song Feng retreating, Ding Wan and Feng Xiao rushed forward. The sound of the flute changed to the sound of the zither. The music, which was originally as deep as the yellow sky and thick earth, became sonorous and fierce, shaking people's hearts and souls. Qin, she was stimulated by the sound of the zither and flute, and he felt the spiritual aura inside his body surging. He almost couldn't control it, so he immediately steadied his mind and wholeheartedly guided the spiritual aura back. Insignificant skill. Master Song Feng snorted coldly. A black object suddenly flew out of the black aura. Its speed was extremely fast and it suddenly smashed towards the Wan and Feng couple. As soon as this black object left the range of Master Song Feng's black aura, it suddenly swelled up. In an instant, it became like a small mountain and suddenly pressed down on the Wan and Feng couple. Seeing this, the sound of the Wan and Feng couple changed, becoming simple and deep again. But this time it wasn't so easy to block. Master Song Feng grinned hideously. The small mountain broke through the net of music and pressed down on the 2 of them with great momentum. Ding Wan and Feng Xiao looked extremely solemn. The couple looked at each other, stopped playing, and each threw the zither and flute in their hands. These 2 magic weapons carried extremely dense spiritual aura, and under the support of the couple's spiritual aura, they suddenly burst into dazzling spiritual light. Qin, she felt it was extremely dazzling, so he couldn't help but raise his hand to block the spiritual light. This wasn't the first time he saw nascent soul cultivators fighting. He had an extraordinarily powerful nascent soul master, so his vision was originally very high. However, when he saw these people fighting, he still felt he couldn't watch them closely. Nascent soul cultivators were nascent soul cultivators after all. Although he was only one step away from the nascent soul realm, his strength was still far from them. If he had already formed his nascent soul now, even if he was only in the early stage of the nascent soul realm, he definitely wouldn't be completely powerless when facing these people. Master Song Feng, Ding Wan and Feng Xiao were fighting fiercely, but there was also a quiet Taoist Ji next to them. Taoist Ji looked to be in his early 20s and looked very delicate. Rumor had it that when he traveled outside, people often regarded him as an aura-refining disciple who didn't understand worldly affairs, but when it came to fighting he was no less ruthless than Master Song Feng. Over the years, it was unknown how many blind cultivators had been deceived by his harmless appearance and died in his hands. In the spiritual light of the fight between Master Song Feng, Ding Wan and Feng Xiao, Qin couldn't see their movements clearly, but he knew this was the best time. Therefore he quietly took out a jade talisman from his Qingquan bag and flicked it with his fingertips. The jade talisman burst into flames and soared into the sky under the cover of the spiritual light. Fortunately this time he finally sent it out smoothly. The jade talisman disappeared into the sky, and the fight suddenly stopped. The devil aura on Master Song Feng's body disappeared and he snorted coldly. Qin Shoujing, what the hell are you doing now? Qin Shi smiled. He knew this old man wouldn't let him go easily even though he hadn't dealt with him yet. Nothing. Junior just wanted to inform my master that there's a good show to watch. Master Song Feng didn't say anything for a while, but the black aura on his body kept surging as if it was brewing and he might attack Qin Shi in the next moment. His attention was focused on Qin Shi, so how could the three nascent soul cultivators let go of this opportunity? Ding Wan shouted. She held the zither with one hand and held the strings with the other, then suddenly pulled and loosened it. The strings suddenly let out a buzzing sound, and the spiritual sound suddenly spread out. Feng Xiao turned his fingers and clasped the jade flute, then he brought it to his lips and blew it in a relaxed manner. The husband and wife, one attacking and one defending, one tightening and one loosening, cooperated seamlessly. Even though Master Song Feng was known as the #1 cultivator in the celestial pole, he didn't dare to look down on them. The black aura on his body became thicker and thicker, and it suddenly scattered like a drop of ink. The black aura on Master Song Feng's body was known as Primordial Devil Aura. If this Primordial Devil Aura danced, it would be like gales and thunder with amazing power. The Primordial Devil Aura scattered and condensed into a long saber that was about to chop the Wan and Feng couple. But in an instant, the black long saber suddenly changed direction and chopped to the right side of the back. Ah, there was a scream. It was Taoist Ji who had just quietly hid behind Master Song Feng. Hearing Taoist Ji scream, Qin Shi's first thought was that this person really wasn't mute. Then he thought that Master Song Feng was worthy of being a great cultivator in the late nascent soul stage. Even a bystander like him couldn't see through him. In the middle of a fight, Master Song Feng could actually beat him at his own game and create a diversion. Umph. Master Song Feng snorted. Stinky Taoist, do you really think no one noticed? A vicious expression instantly appeared on Taoist Ji's delicate and harmless face. He ignored the saber of devil aura that had sunk into his shoulder and suddenly flicked his hands. A tiny object flew towards Master Song Feng's face. Master Song Feng was about to dodge, but the two of them were too close. He didn't manage to dodge and was hit. As soon as this thing was thrown onto Master Song Feng's body, it immediately made a huge explosion. Ah! This time it was Master Song Feng's voice. This time it was Taoist Ji who sneered. He grabbed the saber of devil aura that had sunk into his shoulder, threw it away and said in a hoarse voice, Old Song Feng, how does the sky explosion thunder taste? The primordial devil aura on Master Song Feng's body seemed to have gathered and scattered, and he seemed to have suffered a heavy injury. Ding Wan and Feng Xiao looked at each other and both attacked. Just as Master Song Feng was about to bear the heavy attack of the three nascent soul cultivators, a black shadow flashed. Master Song Feng instantly left his original spot and appeared in midair. The black aura around him condensed and solidified again. Ignorant children. Master Song Feng snorted coldly. Do you really think that I'll be at your mercy after taking this blow? At this time he was floating in midair, and his primordial devil aura didn't diminish at all. It seemed that he hadn't been injured at all. The three nascent soul cultivators were stunned, and a look of surprise appeared on their faces. Fellow Taoist Ji, Ding Wan said in a low voice, this is... Taoist Ji was also in disbelief. The expression on his face kept changing. He stared at Master Song Feng and said, impossible, he's bluffing. Fellow Taoists, you know the power of the sky explosion thunder. This old man took it head on. I absolutely don't believe he's fine. Feng Zhao's expression changed for a while and then he said, fellow Taoist Ji is right. Sister Luan, don't be fooled by him. Hearing what her husband said, Ding Yuan no longer had any doubts. She put away her zither and was ready to go. Right at this moment, several flight lights suddenly flashed across the sky and came in their direction. The incoming people were also divided into two groups, coming from two different directions. Old Taoist fooling. Feng Zhao murmured as he looked at the group of people that gradually became clearer. Taoist Ji's expression darkened. More than 100 years ago, I had some conflicts with this old Taoist. I'm afraid Ding Yuan and Feng Zhao were silent. Old Taoist Fuling should actually be called Venerable Swordsman Fuling. He was one of the venerable swordsmen in Gujin sect. He entered the sect through Tao, so he always dressed like a secular Taoist, so they called him Old Taoist. Although they were all from the 7 great cultivation groups and would show some respect for each other because they were friends, it was hard to say when interests were at stake. At this time, another group of people also flew closer. Taoist Ji frowned even more. Qin Jinghe, Ding Yuan and Feng Zhao looked at each other with a mysterious look in their eyes. Logically speaking, Qin Jinghe had a pretty good relationship with them, but the problem was that the reason they were fighting against Master Song Feng was because they wanted to fight over the treasure. With the treasure right in front of them, who knew whether or not they would try to snatch it by force. At this time, Feng Zhao secretly glanced at Qin Shi next to him, and Ding Yuan nodded secretly. Feng Zhao suddenly moved and instantly flashed to Qin Shi's side. He said with a smile, Brat Qin, do us a favor. Although Qin Shi had been vigilant, Feng Zhao was a middle-stage nascent soul cultivator after all. He had just summoned the 3-yang real fire sword when Feng Zhao's palm hit his head. Chapter 294. Old Feng. With a loud shout, Lord Taoist Jinghe sped up and rushed to Feng Zhao in an instant. With the Li fire gourd hanging in front of him, he shouted angrily, How dare you attack my disciple? Before Feng Zhao could speak, Ding Yuan said with a smile, Brother Taoist Jinghe, don't worry. My husband was just joking with your boy. Joking? Lord Taoist Jinghe wasn't a slow-witted person. Looking at the scene in front of him, he roughly knew what happened, so his voice also slowed down. That'll do. You husband and wife don't need to play any tricks. Since you protected him this time, consider it as me owing you a favor. Hearing this, Feng Zhao laughed and pointed with 2 fingers. A stream of spiritual aura poured into Qin Shi's shoulder well acupoint. Qin Shi, whose meridians were restricted, finally recovered and breathed a sigh of relief. He bowed to Feng Zhao without any disrespect. Thank you, Senior Feng. Feng Zhao attacked him just now because he wanted to use him to restrain Lord Taoist Jinghe. Lord Taoist Jinghe was very tactful, so Feng Zhao and his wife chose to join hands with him. Qin Shi's mind was clear, so he was still respectful to Feng Zhao. There were many conflicts of interest between cultivators. Since his master chose to join hands with them, they were now companions, so he had no reason to be disrespectful to Feng Zhao. Feng Zhao nodded with a smile, but Ding Yuan smiled sweetly at Lord Taoist Jinghe. Brother Taoist Jinghe, I really like your boy's cleverness. Why don't you become my son-in-law? Although my Fingning is a bit spoiled, she's also a good girl. In just a few seconds, from checks and balances to joining hands to discussing marriage, Old Taoist Fuling and the others who were flying in front hadn't arrived yet, but their topic had already changed. Qin Shi turned a deaf ear to this and walked back to Lord Taoist Jinghe. Master. Seeing that he was alone, Lord Taoist Jinghe looked around. Where's Tiange? Qin Shi was worried about this matter. I got separated from Tiange. Master, since you're here, I'll go find her. Wait. Lord Taoist Jinghe raised his hand to stop them. With a frown he said, Don't act rashly. This is the depths of a mortal's ruins. You shouldn't have come here. Since you're already here, just wait. Once I've dealt with the matter here, I'll go look for Tiange with you. But Qin Shi only said 2 words. When he saw Lord Taoist Jinghe's expression, he could only sigh and obey. Got it? Of course, he knew that his master was right. There were so many nascent soul cultivators here, so it was clear that he had gone in the wrong direction in the fog and entered the depths of a mortal's ruins by mistake. At this time, it was not suitable for him to act alone. But when he thought about how Tiange was still in the fog and couldn't find her way, he felt extremely anxious. Lord Taoist Jinghe naturally understood Qin Shi's absent-minded look, but he didn't say anything to him. Instead, he answered Ding Yuan's question, It's too late. Your Fingning isn't bad, but unfortunately my boy already has a sweetheart. Ding Wan was a little surprised. She glanced at Qin Shi and joked, "What a pity. I wonder which family she's from? Ah, good things don't flow to outsiders. Unfortunately, she's my disciple." Before Lord Taoist Jinghe could finish his complacent words, he heard a gloomy voice. "The three of you are so impatient. It's only been a while but you're already talking about marriage?" This voice belonged to Master Song Feng. His own disciple was killed by Qin Shi. Now that he saw Lord Taoist Jinghe and the Wan and Feng couple talking about their disciple and daughter, he felt extremely resentful. Ding Wan added fuel to the fire. She said with a smile, "Old Song Feng, you don't have a child. Are you jealous? If you have the time you might as well give birth to a— Oh no, with your body that's neither human nor ghost nor monster, I'm afraid you can't give birth, right?" "You," Master Song Feng suddenly became furious. His primordial devil aura surged and transformed into a long knife. During this time, the other nascent soul cultivators landed one after another, staring at Master Song Feng with hostile expressions. Gujian sect's old Taoist Fuling, Sword Venerable Xiao He, individual cultivator Qingming Wanderer, Xianqing School's Lord Taoist Huayan, Tiandao sect's Taoist Haifeng Lu Dequan. Although these people were all in the early stage of the nascent soul realm except for old Taoist Fuling, Lord Taoist Jinghe, Ding Wan, Feng Xiao, and Taoist Ji were all in the middle stage of the nascent soul realm. Master Song Feng paused for a while then snorted coldly. Without saying goodbye, he turned into a black cloud and left. The 10 nascent soul cultivators present all sighed with relief. They had a lot of people so they weren't afraid of Master Song Feng, but this old man was a madman. If they really fought him, with his reputation as the #1 late-stage nascent soul cultivator in the celestial pole, even if they lost they would lose a few people and they probably wouldn't be able to kill him. Now that he left on his own, it couldn't be better. As soon as Master Song Feng left, old Taoist Fuling, who had just arrived, greeted them with a smile. "Fellow Taoist Feng, fellow Taoist Ding, fellow Taoist Ji, fellow Taoist Jinghe, what are you doing?" During the demonic beast riot, Yi Jingwen and Gujian sect had conflicts, so Lord Taoist Jinghe didn't have a good attitude towards old Taoist Fuling. He just casually raised his hand at old Taoist Fuling as a return greeting. Ding Wan smiled and said, "Fellow Taoist Fuling, long time no see. In fact it's nothing. Fellow Taoist Ji and I just found something." "Really?" Old Taoist Fuling's eyes glinted, but under the smiles of Ding Wan and Feng Xiao, the glint quickly dissipated. He was still smiling. "Fellow Taoists, rest assured. You and your wife are working together, so how could I intervene? I just want to broaden my horizons. You won't object, right?" Ding Wan smiled and said slowly, "What are you talking about, fellow Taoist Fuling? It's not a good thing. It's just a piece of Shen Fire Jade essence. I think it's useless to you." Oh. The light in old Taoist Fuling's eyes went out. Shen Fire Jade essence was a good thing and a rare material for refining fire magic weapons, but he was a sword cultivator so it was useless to him. On the contrary, Qin Shi next to Lord Taoist Jinghe brightened his eyes. As a middle-stage nascent soul cultivator, Ding Wan's eyes immediately fell on Qin Shi and she asked with a smile, "Qin boy, are you interested in this Shen Fire Jade essence?" "Oh, that's right. Both of you, master and disciple, practice fire magic." Although her words were kind, Ding Wan glanced at Lord Taoist Jinghe faintly, and her meaning was self-evident. Lord Taoist Jinghe snorted and said, "You two don't need to test me. When have I ever gone back on my words?" There were many intrigues among cultivators, but the higher the level of a cultivator, the more importance they attached to their promises. Once they made a promise they generally wouldn't go back on it unless it involved great benefits. A piece of Shen Fire Jade essence met this standard so Ding Wan and Feng Xiao both wanted to test Lord Taoist Jinghe. However, they also knew that although Qin Jinghe was annoying, he always kept his word. It was fine if he didn't know about the Shen Fire Jade essence, but he still said that after knowing it so he certainly wouldn't compete with them. Among the 5 middle-stage nascent soul cultivators present, old Taoist Fuling wasn't interested, Lord Taoist Jinghe didn't compete, and they were on the same side as Taoist Ji, so they naturally didn't pose any threat. Feng Xiao bowed to the others. "Thank you everyone." Then he winked at Taoist Ji. Taoist Ji nodded and jumped down from the crater. Taoist Ji went to get the Shen Fire Jade essence. Ding Wan looked around and saw a handsome young man in the foundation building realm behind old Taoist Fuling, so she asked with a smile, "Fellow Taoist Fuling, when did you accept a new disciple?" Old Taoist Fuling glanced at the young man behind him, stroked his beard and said with a smile, "This little friend is not my disciple." "Really?" Ding Wan was a little surprised. When did you become so kind? If he's not your disciple, why did you bring him to Demonic Mountain? Haha. Old Taoist Fuling seemed to be in a good mood. It doesn't hurt to tell you, but fellow Taoist Ding, you and your wife can't compete with me. Feng Xiao smiled. What are you talking about, fellow Taoist Fuling? We already have a daughter. Do you think we'll take this little friend as our son-in-law? That's hard to say. Old Taoist Fuling smiled mysteriously. His expression was too mysterious, so the Wan and Feng couple as well as Lord Taoist Jinghe and the others couldn't help but release their divine senses to explore the young man. As soon as they did, their expressions changed. After a long time, Ding Wan murmured, "Pure Yang Constitution." Upon hearing these words, Qin Shi's expression suddenly changed and he couldn't help but look at the young man. Old Taoist Fuling smiled without saying anything, obviously very proud. He wasn't worried that others would compete with him. After all, Pure Yang Constitution was only useful for female cultivators. Ding Wan was the only female cultivator present, and she already had a dual cultivation partner. Although they had a daughter, they loved her like a treasure, so they wouldn't casually find a human furnace for their daughter. Even if other people had female disciples, they had to think about the consequences of competing with him. A moment later, Feng Xiao said faintly, "Fellow Taoist Fuling, you're really lucky. Pure Yang Constitution is hard to find in 1,000 years. Are you going to give him to your disciple as a human furnace?" Hearing the word human furnace, the young man was even more frightened. Old Taoist Fuling said with a smile, "He's not a human furnace. This little friend has a good aptitude, so it's not a big deal to take him as a disciple." Really? Ding Wan wanted to say more, but Taoist Ji had already appeared at the crater, so she stopped talking. Taoist Ji glanced cautiously at the nascent soul cultivators in front of him and then gently threw the Shen Fire Jade essence in his hand. Although the nascent soul cultivators had no intention of snatching it, they didn't leave. Naturally, they were interested in the Shen Fire Jade essence. They wanted to see what the Shen Fire Jade essence that grew in Immortal's ruins looked like. At this moment, when they saw the Shen Fire Jade essence that Taoist Ji threw out, their eyes were fixed on it. Old Taoist Fuling's eyes flashed, and even Lord Taoist Jinghe was a bit tempted. The Shen Fire Jade essence was really too perfect. It was as big as 2 palms, fiery red, crystal clear and extremely pure. They had never seen such a Shen Fire Jade essence. "Seniors." Qin Shi was the first to speak. The Wan and Feng couple and Taoist Ji stared at him vigilantly. Qin Shi said calmly, "Seniors, are you only interested in the Shen Fire Jade essence?" The three of them were stunned, but Ding Wan still said with a smile, "Brat Qin, what do you mean?" Qin Shi said, "Such a large piece of jade essence must have grown here for at least tens of thousands of years, so it's enough to grow a chalcedony. If there's a chalcedony, would you be willing to part with it? I'm willing to exchange it with other treasures." Chalcedony? Lord Taoist Jinghe was moved and his eyes were a bit eager. Yes, this jade essence looks so good. If it grows a chalcedony, it must be good. The 3 middle-stage nascent soul cultivators looked at each other. Chalcedony was rare, but it was nothing compared to this Shen Fire Jade essence. Ding Wan said, "So you want a chalcedony? If there's a chalcedony in this jade essence, I don't mind giving it to you." Qin Shi smiled and bowed to thank them. "Thank you, seniors." A trace of regret flashed in the eyes of old Taoist Fuling and the others. Now that they found the Shen Fire Jade essence was so outstanding, they were all greedy. If Qin Jinghe's group had a conflict with these 3 people, they could fish in troubled waters. Unfortunately, this Qin brat wanted a chalcedony, and Ding Wan gave him a favor, so it seemed they wouldn't fight. Thinking of this, old Taoist Fuling bowed to the others. "Since there's nothing else, we'll take our leave first. Fellow Taoists, I hope to see you again." Ding Wan and Feng Xiao were eager for them to leave, so they politely bowed back, but Lord Taoist Jinghe's group didn't pay any attention to them. Chapter 295. After old Taoist Fuling left, Feng Xiao took the Shen Fire Jade essence, pressed it with his fingers, explored it with his spiritual aura and said with a smile, "Brat Qin, you're lucky. There's really a chalcedony in this jade essence." "Really?" A happy expression appeared on Qin Shi's face. Feng Xiao exerted force on his fingers, and a crack appeared on the Shen Fire Jade essence. Water-like clear jade liquid flowed out and condensed into a transparent crystal as soon as it came into contact with the air. When the jade liquid flowed out, Feng Xiao threw the crystal in his palm to Qin Shi. "My wife said this chalcedony is for you." With such a pure color, this chalcedony was definitely more than 1,000 years old. Qin took it and cupped his fists in delight. Thank you, seniors. I'll remember your kindness. Ding Yuan smiled. You're not going to marry my Fengning. Why do you need to remember? Although Qin was experienced, he was a bit thin-skinned, so he just smiled and didn't answer Ding Yuan's teasing. Lord Daoist Jinghe glanced at them and said, You and your wife shouldn't bully my disciple. If there's nothing else, we'll leave. Although Lord Daoist Jinghe had said he wouldn't intervene, there were 4 nascent soul cultivators here, which added variables. The Wan and Feng couple and Daoist Ji were eager for him to leave, so no one was polite. Feng Xiao said, In that case I'll see you later. Lord Daoist Jinghe nodded and left with Qin Shi, Lord Daoist Huayan, Daoist Haifeng and the others. After flying out of the range of the 3 middle-stage nascent soul cultivators' divine senses, the group of 5 stopped, and Lord Daoist Jinghe asked, Where did Tiange go missing? Qin Shi pointed in a direction. That way, about half a day's journey. Lord Daoist Jinghe looked at the direction he pointed and frowned. You mean in the fog? Yes. How long have you been separated? Was there anyone else with you? Does Tiange have any injuries? What happened? Tell me slowly. Lord Daoist Jinghe asked questions one by one. Qin Shi suppressed his anxiety and roughly described their situation in the past few days. Of course, he skipped the part that was inconvenient to say in public. When he talked about how they were separated, Lord Daoist Jinghe and the 3 nascent soul cultivators exchanged glances. The black-robed Daoist Haifeng, who looked like a demonic cultivator, said, Qin family's kid, this is the first time we've encountered the fog you mentioned. Previously we spent quite a bit of effort to get out. We really don't have much confidence in searching there. This answer surprised Qin Shi. He looked at Lord Daoist. Lord Daoist Jinghe said, A cultivator who's just formed his gold core won't survive more than a few days in Immortal's ruins if he doesn't have any special means. Tiange is my disciple, I can't just leave her there alone. Daoist Daoist Dan didn't, Daoist Lu Dequan and Lu didn't, Daoist was my, she and didn't. Qin Master Jinghe, Daoist sect. Fire and the Daoist, and Daoist Feng and Lu Daoist Lu. The Qin Yang Dao Master. Luan? Daoist Jinghe said faintly, Got it. Junior Marshal Brother Huayan and I will be there in 2 days. If we don't arrive, you don't have to wait for us. Daoist Haifeng and Lu Dequan looked at each other, nodded and left in flight lights. When they disappeared, Lord Daoist Huayan, who had been silent, asked, Senior Marshal Brother Jinghe, how are we going to find her? This problem gave Lord Daoist Jinghe a headache. They had all been through the fog and knew divine senses were useless in that place. Even though they were nascent soul cultivators, they had to be very careful. Brat. Lord Daoist Jinghe pointed at Qin Shi. Aren't you usually very capable? How could this happen when you took Tiange out? Qin Shi lowered his head and didn't say anything. He was indeed not cautious enough. He knew Immortal's ruins was full of danger, but he didn't prevent them from getting separated. Seeing him like this, Lord Daoist Jinghe felt he couldn't be blamed, so he said, There's no other way. Let's go find her. Junior Marshal Brother Huayan, let's split up. You go to the east and I'll go to the west. We'll meet here in a day and a half whether we find her or not. Okay. Lord Daoist Huayan didn't say any nonsense. He directly dived down, turned into a flight light, and disappeared into the fog not far away. Watching Lord Daoist Huayan's figure disappear, Lord Daoist Jinghe stood for a while and suddenly said, Tell me, did something happen between you and Tiange? Qin Shi was stunned. Realizing what his master was asking about, he coughed and looked away. Let's talk about it later. Seeing him like this, Lord Daoist Jinghe was greatly surprised. Brat, did you succeed? Qin Shi didn't answer, but even a blind man could see the joy in his eyes. Lord Daoist Jinghe wanted to laugh, but he felt unhappy because he didn't see it. His expression twisted for a while, but he had to pat Qin Shi's shoulder. Not bad. You didn't waste Master's kindness. Qin Shi was happy to think of this, but he was more worried about Tiange's safety. He said, Master, let's go find her first. If we're late, Tiange will be in more danger. Tiange was indeed in danger now. In the fog, a large group of gold wire rats appeared out of nowhere. Although their cultivation levels weren't high, there were a lot of them, and they appeared and disappeared unpredictably in the fog. Shi and Jing Xingji had been killing for a long time, but they still hadn't killed all of them. Tiange swallowed several regeneration pills and watched Xiaohua jumping up and down to force the demonic beast to retreat with spells. She gasped and said, Fellow Daoist Jing, we can't go on like this. Jing Xingji, who was controlling his flying sword to kill the enemies, rolled his eyes. I know that, but do you have a way? Emo Chinga thought for a while and said, there's a way we can try. Even if it doesn't work, we can still take a break. The two of them had been killing for a long time without stopping. Although Jing Xingji still had spiritual aura in his body, he felt mentally exhausted, so he said, that's not bad. Tell me what you want to do. Emo Chinga killed another group of demonic beasts and said, fellow Taoist, you can block these demonic beasts for a while. Jing Xingji didn't say anything. The long sword in his hand suddenly burst with bright white light, enveloping the two people and the demonic beast. Although this person's character wasn't likable, there was no doubt about his strength. Under the sword light, none of the demonic beasts could cross the boundary. Emo Chinga didn't waste any time. She touched her Qingkuan bag, took out formation-laying tools and spirit stones, and quickly laid a formation around the two of them. Jing Xingji glanced at her, feeling a bit surprised. The Tao of formations could be considered the most unorthodox of the unorthodox methods. Studying formations required a lot of time, and before reaching the nascent soul realm, every cultivator hated the fact that they had too little time to cultivate. They simply couldn't spend too much time studying unorthodox methods, so there were very few cultivators below the nascent soul realm who were proficient in formations. However, he didn't know that Emo Chinga's situation was a bit special. When she was building her foundation, she was worried that her cultivation speed would be too fast, so she deliberately slowed down and spent a lot of time studying unorthodox methods, so her formations were much better than cultivators in the same realm as her. The formation in her hands now was the 4 symbols 100 flowers formation she modified. The 4 symbols were mainly for defense, while the 100 flowers were mainly for killing. It was a compound formation. However, it hadn't been long since she formed her gold core, so she didn't spend much time on formations. This set of formation-laying tools was prepared for her when she was building her foundation, so its power was limited. Just as she was laying the formation, Jing Xingji suddenly shouted, someone's coming. Emo Chinga was startled, then delighted. She hurriedly asked, what's his cultivation level? Her divine sense was injured, so it was even weaker than Jing Xingji's. The fog also blocked divine senses, so Jing Xingji sensed for a long time before he said with uncertainty, he seems to be in the core formation realm. Core formation realm? Could it be? Before he could finish his words, a vague black-clothed figure appeared in the fog. As soon as this person appeared, the surrounding gold wire rats found a new target, and several hundred of them immediately turned around and rushed towards this person. Seeing this, Emo Chinga stopped laying the formation. She and Jing Xingji glanced at each other and each controlled the flying swords in their hands to kill that person. Fellow Taoist. Jing Xingji said loudly, I'm a cultivator from Gujin sect. May I ask your name? In the fog, the black figure heard his voice and paused for a moment, but it didn't answer and continued to focus on killing. Emo Chinga squinted her eyes and asked hesitantly, look, isn't that a female cultivator? Although the fog was hazy, the figure in black that appeared faintly was indeed graceful. Jing Xingji only took a glance then said, it's a female cultivator. Hearing his affirmative answer, Emo Chinga was secretly disappointed. Although she knew Qinshi's cultivation level and methods were higher than hers and he was also very experienced, this was Demonic Mountain. She felt very uneasy after being separated from him for so long. What should we do now? Jing Xingji glanced around and said, let's go and take a look. The more people, the more assurance. Emo Chinga had no objection. As for female cultivators, few of them were ruthless, and the other party was also trapped in the same fog, so they should be able to form an alliance. The two of them manipulated their flying swords. Xiaohua spewed sun-real fire and attacked the direction of the black-clothed woman. The two of them were getting closer and closer, and they could clearly see the woman's appearance. She wore claw gloves and was fighting with demonic beast. Unexpectedly, she was a martial cultivator. Jing Xingji's voice was filled with excitement. She's a beauty? Emo Chinga couldn't help but roll her eyes at him. This guy really changed. What kind of situation is this? He's still thinking about the other party being a beauty? Although she said that, Emo Chinga was still a bit curious. She looked at the woman's face and what she saw stunned her. She had a very delicate face. It wasn't very beautiful, but it had a kind of calm and cold beauty. Of course, this wasn't the reason she was surprised. What she found strange was that she looked a bit familiar. A delicate woman, a martial cultivator using claw gloves. Cultivators always had good memories. Emo Chinga slowly recalled such a person. She knew who this person was. She took a breath and said secretly, Fellow Taoist Jing, this person is related to Master Song Feng. Jing Xingji paused and looked at her suspiciously. There was no one in Kunwu who didn't know about Master Song Feng. Jing Xingji naturally also knew about this celestial pole's #1 late nascent soul cultivator and his disreputable reputation. He said secretly, "Do you know her?" "I've seen her once." Mo Chenga stared at the female cultivator without blinking. Yes, more than 50 years ago, the female cultivator who appeared in Lord Taoist Xuanin's nascent soul ceremony and fought with her was this woman. Chapter 296. At Lord Taoist Xuanin's nascent soul ceremony, this woman was still in the late stage of the foundation building realm. After Master Song Feng appeared, she inexplicably disappeared. Mo Chenga didn't know what technique she used. Mo Chenga didn't expect to see her again more than 50 years later, and she had also advanced to the core formation realm. This wasn't strange. At that time, this woman was already in the late stage of the foundation building realm. If she was really Master Song Feng's disciple or grand disciple, it was normal for her to advance to the early stage of the core formation realm in 50 years. Mo Chenga herself was only in the middle stage of the foundation building realm at that time, but now she had also advanced to the core formation realm. She roughly told Jing Xingji what happened. Jing Xingji paused but didn't say anything. Although he liked beauties, his heart was ruthless. In comparison, he was even more ruthless than Qin Shi. At least, if Qin Shi promised to take someone with him, he wouldn't talk nonsense. Jing Xingji, on the other hand, kept fawning on her along the way but never truly regarded her as a partner. However, this woman was a core formation cultivator after all. In this situation, one more person was always good. Mo Chenga didn't know what decision Jing Xingji would make. Mo Chenga turned to look at the woman and found that her martial arts skills were much better than they were 50 years ago. Martial cultivators were the same as sword cultivators. They had to surpass ordinary cultivators in fights of magical power. The higher the cultivation level, the more terrifying this advantage was. Although this woman was only in the early stage of the core formation realm, judging from the power of her attacks, she wasn't weaker than ordinary middle-stage core formation cultivators, maybe even stronger. Mo Chenga's heart was also in turmoil. If she joined hands with this woman, she'd be a good help, but if she turned against her, in this fog, there were really dangers everywhere. After a while, Jing Xingji finally said via voice transmission, "If we can join hands with her, then let's do it." Mo Chenga nodded. In any case, she chose to believe Jing Xingji at this time. "Miss?" Jing Xingji said loudly, "I'm a cultivator from Gujin sect. May I ask if you're Master Song Feng's disciple?" As soon as he said that, the black-clothed figure paused, turned around, and glanced at the two of them warily. Jing Xingji smiled and said to her, "Miss, don't worry. We don't have any bad intentions. This fog is really strange. You and I are trapped here, so are you willing to join hands?" The woman stared at them for a while but didn't say anything. Jing Xingji continued, "There are dangers everywhere on Demonic Mountain. Although Miss is skilled and bold, you're riding alone in the end. Having an extra helper also means having an extra escape route." When he said that, Jing Xingji's expression was very sincere. The woman looked at him, then at Mo Chenga, who was resisting the gold wire rat's attacks behind him. Her vigilant expression slowly softened. Before she opened her mouth, she said in a low, hoarse voice, "What if we join hands?" Hearing this, Jing Xingji smiled and said, "Naturally, we'll join hands to protect ourselves and find a way out." "Looking for a way out?" The woman's lips curled into a smile, but it looked like she was mocking them. "Have you found a way out?" "No." Jing Xingji said frankly, "However, the three of us are safer than one." Mo Chenga had to admit that when Jing Xingji's expression was serious, he was indeed a bit charming. Under his gaze, this woman gradually became less callous. She said, "How can I trust you?" Jing Xingji said with a smile, "What's the benefit of killing you in this fog? Besides, since you can reach Immortal's ruins, you must have extraordinary skills. Even if you fall out with us, you must have a way to escape, right?" After he said that, the woman was lost in thought. In a flash, a group of gold wire rats in front of her suddenly attacked. With a flash of sword light, Jing Xingji's flying sword was like a waterfall. Wherever the sword light went, flesh and blood flew everywhere. The group of gold wire rats died on the spot. After the death of this group of gold wire rats, the other gold wire rats that besieged them also attacked. The three of them didn't dare to neglect and immediately worked together to kill these violent demonic beasts. Originally, Jing Xingji and Mo Chenga didn't have enough lethality because Mo Chenga didn't have a suitable magic weapon. However, this woman was a martial cultivator, so she killed demonic beasts much faster than ordinary cultivators. With the three of them working together, the number of gold wire rats gradually decreased. More than an hour later, all the gold wire rats were finally killed. The three of them working together to kill the demonic beasts was, in fact, an alliance. After killing, the three of them were so tired that Mo Chenga couldn't even stand steadily. Xiaohua simply lay down and stuck out his tongue. The three of them sat on the ground in different postures, gasping for breath. After a while they finally got their breath. Jing Xingji smiled at the woman and said, "Miss, may I know your name?" A hint of hesitation flashed in the woman's eyes and she answered, "Nye Wushang." Jing Xingji was stunned. "Wushang? Charming Wushang? Nikang Wushang?" No. Her expression was cold and emotionless. "It's called nothing and it's called Wushang." Jing Xingji had never heard such a name in his life, so he didn't know what to say for a moment. Wushang. This really didn't sound like a woman's name. After a long time he could only praise, "What a special name." The woman who called herself Nye Wushang showed a mocking smile on her face and didn't answer. "I'm Jing Xingji." Upon hearing Jing Xingji's self-introduction, Nye Wushang just nodded, then turned to Mo Chenga and said, "Fellow Taoist Mo, long time no see. Do you still remember me?" Mo Chenga nodded. She was neither affectionate nor distant, and she replied with the same indifference, "Of course I remember. Unfortunately, I didn't know fellow Taoist's name until today." Cultivators always had good memories, so it wasn't surprising that they remembered each other. However, Mo Chenga still had doubts in her heart. Back then this woman was no different from ordinary cultivators, but today she had been using ventriloquism and her voice was also quite strange. From beginning to end she hadn't opened her mouth to speak. Could it be that something had changed in the past 50 years? However, they originally didn't have any friendship. They could even be said to be enemies. Mo Chenga only thought about it in her heart and didn't ask. After a few simple words, the three of them staggered to recover their spiritual aura. After a while, Jing Xingji finished meditating and asked Nye Wushang, "Miss Nye, how long have you been here? Do you have any clues about how to get out?" Nye Wushang answered, "About a day. My divine sense is useless here, and I've lost all sense of direction. I haven't been able to find a way out." Her situation was similar to theirs. Jing Xingji turned to look at Mo Chenga and said, "We're the same. However, along the way fellow Taoist Qingwei left a formation imprint. I wonder if you've noticed it? Were you the ones who drew that 8 trigrams formation?" Nye Wushang frowned. Mo Chenga answered, "Yes. In that case, fellow Taoist Nye has encountered it along the way?" Nye Wushang nodded. "I've encountered it a few times. Unfortunately, I'm not very proficient in formations, so I don't know how to point to it." "A few times?" "We've been following the directions of the 8 trigrams formation. If fellow Taoist has encountered it several times, it means fellow Taoist has gone around several times." "I see." Nye Wushang was stunned. She then asked in a low voice, "So, fellow Taoists still have a way to get out?" Mo Chenga's expression was indifferent. "I'm not sure about that. Nobody knows how big this fog is, and we don't know whether our direction is correct. In this fog, even our divine senses can make mistakes, and formation diagrams aren't completely reliable." What she said wasn't false. Formation diagrams could only point to the direction, but they couldn't point to the correct path. Moreover, since this fog could affect divine senses, could it also affect other judgments? They didn't know. The three of them were silent for a while. Jing Xingji said, "Young Mrs., have you recovered your spiritual aura?" "I've recovered." With a small circulation inside her body, Mo Chenga recovered her spiritual aura very quickly. Nye Wushang also nodded. Jing Xingji said, "Then what do you think about the rest of our journey?" Mo Chenga didn't answer immediately. She turned to look at Nye Wushang. Nye Wushang lowered her head and also didn't answer. After a moment of silence, Jing Xingji said, "Ladies, this is related to our lives. If you have something to say, you'd better say it now." Right now he didn't have a smile on his face. Instead he looked at them seriously. "I have nothing to say." Mo Chenga was the first to speak. She said faintly, "To be frank, my strength is inferior to yours. I only know a little about formations, that's all. Using formation diagrams to point out the direction is the only way I can think of." Jing Xingji and Nye Wushang didn't answer. After a moment of silence, Nye Wushang's low and hoarse voice rang out. Fellow Taoist, you have this 5th-rank spiritual beast, so your strength isn't weak. You're being too modest. Emo Chenga smiled. I'm just speaking the truth. Spiritual beasts are too weak compared to cultivators. But fellow Taoist's magic weapon is also extraordinary. Nie Wushang raised her eyebrows and smiled. Her smile didn't seem to be a simple one. The previous few times, it was always filled with ridicule, but this time, it had a different meaning. Emo Chenga pretended she didn't see anything and smiled slightly. Fellow Taoist Nie, you flatter me. Nie Wushang continued, Fellow Taoist Emo, I heard your master and senior martial brother both came to Demonic Mountain? But why are you alone? Emo Chenga glanced at her then said flatly, they have another purpose. Is that so? Nie Wushang smiled again. This time, her smile finally had a charming feeling, but it seemed a bit gloomy. Fellow Taoist Emo. You can't contact them, right? Emo Chenga didn't move, but Jing Xingji's sword was unsheathed with a swish. The sword light approached Nie Wushang. Nie Wushang, however, didn't move. She raised her head and smiled at Jing Xingji. Fellow Taoist Jing, what are you doing? You have nothing to do with Shenqing school, right? Jing Xingji's gaze was as cold as ice. He said coldly, I have even less to do with Master Song Feng. Nie Wushang still ignored the motionless flying sword hovering in front of her. She said, I heard fellow Taoist Mo already has a Taoist name now. When I first met you several decades ago, I really didn't expect this day would come so quickly. Fellow Taoist is worthy of being Lord Taoist Jinghe's brilliant disciple. Mo Chenga sat still and replied, Fellow Taoist Nie, you flatter me. To be honest, Nie Wushang stared at Mo Chenga, her expression gradually turning cold. I'm not jealous of fellow Taoist Mo's talent, but I'm extremely jealous of fellow Taoist Mo's experiences. A disciple of a famous school, a nascent soul master, and he loves his disciple as much as his own life. Fellow Taoist's life is really good. By the end of her speech, Nie Wushang was no longer looking at Mo Chenga. Instead, she was smiling a bit absent-mindedly. Jing Xingji's expression changed. The sword light flashed and he withdrew. Fellow Taoist Nie, what do you mean by saying all this? Chapter 297. Nothing. Nie Wushang stood up, pulled on her gloves and said expressionlessly, I'm not like fellow Taoist Mo. Aside from brute force I have no other strong points. I'll listen to you two fellow Taoists on how to get out. After a while, Jing Xingji sheathed his sword and sat back down. I have an idea, but I don't know if fellow Taoists are willing to give it a try. Mo Chenga and Nie Wushang immediately turned to him. Jing Xingji said, it's easy to say but there's a certain risk. Mo Chenga said, we were just lucky to be trapped here. If we encounter any troublesome demonic beasts, how good can we be? If fellow Taoist Jing has an idea, you might as well tell us. Nie Wushang also nodded expressionlessly and didn't object. Jing Xingji smiled and pointed above. Since we can't tell the direction, we might as well fly up. There's always an end to this fog, right? Both Mo Chenga and Nie Wushang were stunned. Mo Chenga pondered for a moment then said, but fellow Taoist Jing, there's immortal aura above immortals' ruins. We don't have immortals' bodies so we can't stand immortal aura at all. What if we run into it? Jing Xingji said, this is the risk I'm talking about. This immortal aura shouldn't exist in the human world, so immortal aura has a repulsive effect on many things. This fog must be the same. I'm sure there's a gap between the fog and immortal aura. If we're lucky we can leave through this gap. Mo Chenga and Nie Wushang were lost in thought. They ruled out this method from the beginning because there was immortal aura above immortals' ruins. The powerful power in immortal aura was quite terrifying for cultivators like them. But Jing Xingji's words weren't unreasonable. They didn't know how long they could stay trapped in the fog like this. The group of gold wire rats just now were all below the 5th rank, but they were already so difficult to deal with. What if they encountered demonic beasts above the 5th rank? They might as well try their luck. Maybe they could really get out. Okay. Mo Chenga made up her mind. I think fellow Taoist Jing's idea is feasible. Nie Wushang also nodded. Her hoarse voice rang out, fellow Taoists, are the seniors of your sect nearby? Mo Chenga and Jing Xingji looked at each other and Jing Xingji said, fellow Taoist Nie, do you mean sending a message? That's right. Nie Wushang shifted her gaze between the two of them and said, of course, the two of you can also refuse. Perhaps the one who comes first will be my master at that time. Mo Chenga's eyes flickered, but she didn't say anything. From what Nie Wushang said, It seemed she was really Master Songfeng's disciple. Moreover, Master Songfeng also came to Demonic Mountain. This wasn't good news. Although Master Songfeng wasn't a good person, there was no doubt that he was strong. Furthermore, he had old grudges against both Lord Daoist Jinghe and Qin Shi. Qin Shi was in this. Not to Daoist Jingji Shen. Qin Master and in. Daoist Mo Sheng. Mo. With this thought in mind, Mo Chenga glanced at Jing Xingji. Wang Nye from. Wang, Wu from. Forget it. We don't have many thousand miles summoning talismans. Let's talk about it after we're sure we can get out. Mo Chenga was relieved. She was really worried Master Songfeng would come. The three of them did as they said. First of all, they had to find a suitable place to fly up. Core formation cultivators could fly high in the sky, but the fog here was unclear, so they had to be careful. Second, they had to prepare defensive magic weapons and talismans for emergencies. Finally, the three of them were in trouble together, but they weren't of one mind, so they had to guard against others. Mo Chenga didn't dare to trust either of them. Nye Wushang was Master Songfeng's disciple, and Jing Xingji was ruthless. She couldn't trust either of them. She was the weakest among the three, so they had to be careful. After a while, the three of them finally found a suitable place to fly up. This should also be a relic of the fight between immortals and demons in the distant past era. The neat rocks were cut off, exposing the horrible greenish-gray inside. After millions of years of weathering, they no longer had sharp edges, but they still retained their strange appearance. Jing Xingji flew several dozen feet up to check the situation. He then came down and said, "Let's do it here. It doesn't look abnormal." Mo Chenga also went up to take a look. Seeing nothing abnormal, she nodded in agreement. Nye Wushang, on the other hand, looked casual and didn't look at it carefully. The three of them then sat in meditation and rested, preparing magic weapons, talismans, and the like. After a long time, Jing Xingji asked, "Fellow Taoists, are you ready?" If he had the intention of seducing someone, he'd call them Miss. Now that he called them fellow Taoists, it was clear he'd changed his mind. Mo Chenga and Nye Wushang both nodded. Nye Wushang was a martial cultivator, so she didn't have much to prepare. Mo Chenga, on the other hand, had always been cautious and put her things in the most convenient places. That being the case, let's get started. Wait. Nye Wushang's voice rang out. The three of us go up together? Wouldn't it be more convenient to leave one person outside? Jing Xingji smiled. Among the three of us, who's more reassuring to stay down there? Nye Wushang and Mo Chenga were speechless. Indeed, the three of them didn't trust each other, so staying behind to look after each other was unnecessary. Something really happened up there, they could only blame it on their bad luck. The three of them silently took out their flying magic weapons, operated their protective spiritual aura and began to fly up. This process was very slow, very similar to the situation when they climbed tens of thousands of feet peak before. However, it was very likely that they would encounter immortal aura instead of devil aura, so they also had to carefully avoid it or use their protective spiritual aura to block it. The three of them flew higher and higher, getting farther and farther away from the ground. Mo Chenga looked down. She didn't know why, but she felt a bit restless. She was now a core formation cultivator, so her perception of the mandate of heaven was much stronger than before. This was indeed not a good sign. She looked at Jing Xingji and found that he was also looking at her with a frown. Her heart stirred. Just as she was about to ask him in secret, she suddenly felt her ankle being pulled down by someone. She didn't have time to think too much. Her flying sword flew out of her sleeve and flew close to her ankle. At the same time she looked down. With a single glance he was astonished. She originally thought it was one of the two people who sneak attacked her, but she didn't expect it to be a hand that stretched out from the rock wall. Mo Chenga had wandered in the cultivation world for many years, but this was the first time she encountered such a strange scene. She felt her scalp go numb and she was so shocked that she almost cut off her foot. In a flash, Jing Xingji grabbed her hand and slashed down with his flying sword. His flying sword was an ancient magic weapon that could be called the same as Qin Shi's three-young real fire sword. With one slash, that rock hand was cut off. After being cut off, those rocks seemed to have lost their vitality and fell one after another. Mo Chenga didn't have time to breathe a sigh of relief. On the other side, Nye Wushang let out a soft cry and was also entangled by these rock hands. Immediately afterward, countless rock hands stretched out from the cliff they were facing and tried to grab them. The three of them fought with these rock hands. Jing Xingji was fine. His flying sword was very sharp, so these rocks couldn't withstand his slash. Nye Wushang was slightly more difficult to deal with. Her boxing gloves were covered with spikes. If it was something else, it wouldn't be able to withstand a single punch from her. However, these rocks weren't afraid of spikes at all, so she had to use more strength than usual to smash these rocks. Mo Chinga's situation was similar to Nie Wuxiang's. She didn't have many offensive magic weapons on her, and the water element jade bottle and the earth element stone seal weren't suitable for the current situation. Her remaining flying sword wasn't as good as Jing Xingji's, so it was very strenuous for her to slash them. Mo Chinga found that using the flying sword consumed her spiritual aura very quickly, so she quickly stopped. She released Xiaohua from her spiritual beast bag and let it stand on her shoulder. She then used the sun real fire to burn these rock hands, which finally made things a bit easier. After fighting for a while, the three of them finally escaped from the rock hands. They flew some distance away before they stopped and didn't dare to approach again. The three of them looked at each other, then Mo Chinga asked, "Fellow Taoists, what is this thing?" Nie Wuxiang shook her head with a pale face. Although she wasn't weak, these strange rocks were extremely hard, which happened to restrain her. Right now she was fighting a bit awkwardly. I've never encountered such a strange thing. How can rocks be like living things? Jing Xingji waved his hand, surrounding himself with sword lights. He said, I also don't know. However, it's not surprising that there are strange things on Demonic Mountain. That was true. The world was so big that nothing was too strange, let alone a strange place like Demonic Mountain. The environment here was different from the human world. Perhaps the rules of the human world simply didn't apply here. The three of them were silent for a while. In the end, Nie Wuxiang said, "Forget it. It's not the time to look into this. Since we've already flown here, let's continue." Mo Chinga nodded in agreement. I have no objection. What about fellow Taoist Jing? And Jing Xingji answered. Compared to them, he was the most relaxed. Although he had been fighting for a while, he almost didn't lose any spiritual aura. After being attacked by the rock hands, the three of them became even more cautious. Flying high in the sky full of gales, restrictions, and immortal aura wasn't safe. After flying for a while, they reached the end of the cliff they climbed. Mo Chinga took a look and found that there were a lot of pink ball-like flowers growing on the hilltop, which looked very familiar. After looking for a while, she suddenly let out a cry of surprise and pointed at those pink ball-like flowers. Fellow Taoists, look. Are those the heavenly fragrant flowers that grow heavenly aromatic beans? Nie Wuxiang only glanced at them then looked away with disinterest. I'm not proficient in spiritual plants, so I can't recognize them. Jing Xingji looked at her with a somewhat strange expression then nodded. Probably. Heavenly aromatic herbs aren't very rare on Demonic Mountain. I once heard people talk about them and they indeed look very similar. Upon hearing his affirmation, Mo Chinga hesitated for a moment, but in the end, she still gave up. Forget it. She absolutely didn't dare to take any more risks after what happened just now. At worst, she'd just buy some heavenly aromatic beans when they got out. Chapter 298. As the three of them flew up, the fog became thinner and the immortal aura got closer and closer. Seeing that the immortal aura formed by the fallen immortals was right in front of them, the three of them couldn't help but stop. At that moment, even Jing Xingji looked hesitant. They guessed that there was a gap between the immortal aura and the fog. Now the immortal aura was right in front of them, but the fog hadn't reached its end. No one knew whether they would explode because of touching the immortal aura if they flew up again. What should they do next? Fellow Taoist Jing. Before Mo Chinga could finish speaking, Jing Xingji flew up again. Mo Chinga and Nie Wuxiang glanced at each other and eventually followed him. The fog became thinner and thinner, and the immortal aura around them also became more and more abundant. The three of them had to spend more time blocking the immortal aura. This process was very complicated. They constantly consumed and replenished their spiritual aura. Mo Chinga occasionally looked down and saw that the mountain below had become a small dot. After a long time, she heard Jing Xingji call out in surprise, "Fellow Taoists, look." Mo Chinga looked up and saw that above the thin fog, there was a light without any obstruction. They finally rushed out of the fog. The three of them felt like they were reborn. They were trapped in the fog for just over a day, but the feeling that they couldn't get rid of the fog no matter where they went made them feel like it was a long time. After a moment of silence, Jing Xingji said, "Fellow Taoists, we're out of the fog. The most dangerous moment is below us. Don't lower your guard." Mo Chinga and Nie Wuxiang regained their senses and nodded. They both had quiet personalities, which was something Jing Xingji was very glad about. He liked women, but he hated others who held him back when he was in danger. Fortunately, these two didn't have bad tempers. The immortal aura was very close to them, so they had to be very careful every time they flew. Fortunately, they were out of the fog and could clearly distinguish the direction. 10,000 feet peak was to their south, but there was a big volcano to their north, so they chose the west as their escape route. About half a day later, the three of them got out of the fog without danger and descended to the ground. Chenga finally breathed a sigh of relief. She was always on edge when she was with these two, but now it was finally over. Fellow Taoists. As soon as she landed, Nie Wuxiang's gaze rested on the two of them for a moment before she said, "Since we're out of the fog, I'll take my leave now." Jing Xingji smiled and said, "Why is fellow Taoist Nie in such a hurry? Although we're out of the fog, this is the Immortals' ruins. There are still dangers everywhere." The corners of Nie Wuxiang's mouth curled up, revealing a somewhat mocking smile. "Fellow Taoist Jing, just take it that I'm a coward. If I'm not careful and run into your masters, I don't want this life of mine." After she finished speaking, she activated her flying magic weapon, turned around and left without saying anything. Chenga stared at her back and sighed inwardly. Putting aside the fact that she was Master Songfeng's disciple, Nie Wuxiang wasn't annoying. Unfortunately, she was still Master Songfeng's disciple. After a moment of silence, Jing Xingji said, "Let's go." However, Chenga didn't move. When Jing Xingji turned around, she said, "Fellow Taoist Jing, I still have to find Senior Martial Brother Shoujing. May I know where you're going?" Jing Xingji raised his eyebrows and asked, "Do you want to part ways with me?" "If fellow Taoist Jing has another purpose, then yes." Chenga said bluntly, "For me, the most important thing is to find Senior Martial Brother Shoujing, so I can't go somewhere else with fellow Taoist Jing first." "Fellow Taoist Jing?" Jing Xingji didn't say anything, but he also didn't leave. After a long time, Chenga called him again when she didn't get an answer from him. Jing Xingji smiled, then suddenly sighed. "Qin Shoujing, his life is really good." Not long ago, Nie Wuxiang said this to her, and now Jing Xingji also said the same thing to her. Chenga had a feeling that this was absurd. In fact, cultivation was about not believing in fate. Since ancient times, how many people had ascended to immortality and become immortals? Since the separation of immortals and devils, there were only a few who entered the deification realm, let alone becoming immortals. Nevertheless, for hundreds of thousands of years, countless cultivators still rushed to enter this cruel cultivation world. They didn't believe in fate that they couldn't ascend to immortality. But now both Nie Wuxiang and Jing Xingji said the same thing. Was his life good? Maybe Qin Shi's life was very smooth, but everything he had today definitely wasn't just because his life was good. Maybe she was the same. Although she wandered from place to place before she was 20, she gradually had everything after she turned 20. But these things also didn't fall from the sky. Whether it was Jing Xingji or Nie Wuxiang, both of them presumably understood these principles, but they both said the same thing. There could only be one explanation: they had too many sad stories in their hearts. Chenga wasn't a talkative person, and she also wasn't interested in prying into other people's privacy, so she didn't answer and asked, "Where does fellow Taoist Jing want to go?" In an instant, Jing Xingji's expression returned to its previous frivolous expression. He said indifferently, "If I want to find Qin Shoujing, then I'll go. This is Immortal's ruins and it's always dangerous to go alone." She didn't know whether he was referring to himself or her by danger. A thought flashed through Chenga's mind, then she said, "All right. In that case, thank you for your kindness, fellow Taoist Jing." Jing Xingji waved his hand, not caring at all. Chenga thought for a moment, then tried to send a summoning talisman. This time, the summoning talisman was sent out, but it fell as soon as it entered the fog. "It seems Qin Shoujing is still in the fog. You'd better not waste the summoning talisman," Jing Xingji said. Chenga regretfully watched the summoning talisman fall to the ground and burn to ashes. She was a bit disheartened. "Do I have to go back?" Jing Xingji thought for a moment, then asked, "Don't you have any other methods of communication?" This reminded Chenga. It wasn't that there weren't other methods of communication, but they weren't as effective as the summoning talisman. Anyway, she didn't have any other methods, so she could give it a try. She took out a jade box from her robe and opened it. Inside were several yellow wax-like objects. They were amber. Qin Shi gave them to her in Kuanzhong City. He said they would emit a strange fragrance after they were burned. As long as they weren't far away, he could smell them. She didn't care at that time, but she didn't expect to use them now. Jing Xingji was stunned when he saw them. He said, "He actually gave them to you?" Chenga looked up and glanced at Jing Xingji. "Fellow Taoist Jing, do you recognize them?" Jing Xingji didn't answer but asked, "Do you know how I met Qin Shoujing?" "I know a little." Jing Xingji smiled then sighed. Back then he didn't even have a Taoist name. In a flash so many years have passed. Qin Shoujing's name has spread throughout Kunwu, but only a few people know his real name. Emo Chenga didn't answer. That was an era very far away from her. At that time she didn't exist in this world. Jing Xingji sighed with emotion for a while then said, "This thing was obtained from an ancient immortal's abode when we first met. Although it's not very useful, there should only be a few pieces in this world in his hands. Using this to communicate is a good method. This kind of fragrance is very special. If he really got lost, it might be able to guide him out. Moreover, it won't easily attract other people's attention." Upon receiving Jing Xingji's affirmation, Mo Chenga smiled. If that's really the case, that'd be the best. Then, just in case, the two of them flew a certain distance in silence. After making sure there was no one around, they sat down and burned the amber. As the flames burned, a strange fragrance they'd never smelled before slowly drifted away. Next they could only wait. Not long after, maybe only about 2 hours, Jing Xingji suddenly moved and stood up. "Someone's coming." Mo Chenga spread her divine sense but was stunned. This is, a powerful spiritual aura fluctuation came from the sky. It was definitely not Qin Shi but a nascent soul cultivator. The two of them glanced at each other. Jing Xingji only had time to say, "Late-stage nascent soul?" A powerful spiritual aura pressure came down from above. A black cloud floated over. Mo Chenga looked up and saw that familiar black cloud. Her expression froze. "Master Song Feng." "It's them?" An arrogant hoarse voice came from the black cloud. Next to the black cloud, Nie Wushang's indifferent expression swept over Jing Xingji and Mo Chenga. "Yes, master." Although Master Songfeng's body was hidden in the black cloud, Mo Chenga could still feel his malicious gaze sweeping over her and Jing Xingji's clothes. She didn't change out of Xianqing School's Taoist robes on this trip, so she couldn't avoid it now. They'd cautiously left the place where they parted ways with Nie Wushang, but they were still easily found. Mo Chenga felt a chill rising from her heart. She'd lived for more than 80 years and cultivated until she reached the core formation realm. She'd encountered many dangerous situations and experienced many life-or-death crises, but she'd never been as nervous as she was now. The #1 cultivator in the celestial pole, the #1 person in the late stage of the nascent soul realm, in front of Master Song Feng, even if she was already in the core formation realm, she was still like an aura-refining cultivator, vulnerable at the first blow. She closed her eyes and silently ran the soul-refining art. Only then did she calm down under Master Song Feng's spiritual aura pressure. At this time Jing Xingji gave her a meaningful look. Mo Chenga could see he was telling her not to act rashly. Master Song Feng's lazy voice came from the black cloud. "Girl, are you the disciple of that old man Qin Jinghe?" Mo Chenga's expression didn't change. She didn't even have to salute and answered calmly, "Yes, senior is Master Song Feng." Master Song Feng's voice was slightly surprised. Qin Jinghe taught his disciples well. Ma Xianin and Qin Shoujing aren't bad. Girl, your cultivation level isn't good, but you're quite courageous. Mo Chenga curled up the corners of her mouth and forced a smile. "Thank you for your praise, senior. But senior definitely didn't come here to praise junior, right? Junior is timid. How about senior give junior a quick death?" Upon hearing what she said, a low hoarse laugh came from the black cloud. Master Song Feng said, "Girl, you're quite interesting. You're much more pleasing to the eye than that old man Qin Jinghe. But it's a pity that you have a master like Qin Jinghe and a senior martial brother like Qin Shoujing. You can only consider yourself unlucky to run into my hands today." Chapter 299. Mo Chenga took a deep breath. She knew her luck had always been bad, but this time she was unprecedentedly unlucky. Master Song Feng was the #1 late-stage nascent soul cultivator in the celestial pole. In front of him she was just an ant at his mercy. But she was really unwilling. She had just stepped into the threshold of a high-level cultivator and had a bright future ahead of her. She also had congenial feelings for Qin Shi. This was the best moment of her life, so how could she be willing to die like this? Countless thoughts flashed through her mind, but in the end Mo Chenga asked calmly, "Senior, what do you want?" Master Song Feng's cold voice came from the black cloud. Unexpectedly he asked, "Little girl, are you Qin Shoujing's sweetheart?" Mo Chenga was stunned. How did Master Song Feng know? At the same time, Nie Wushang looked surprised. She looked at Mo Chenga full of questions. After hesitating for a long time, she finally said to Master Song Feng respectfully and carefully, "Master, this can't be right?" Master Song Feng let out a cold snort in displeasure. A strong gust of wind hit Nye Wushang's face, and with a pa sound, it solidly hit Nye Wushang's face, leaving an obvious red mark. Seeing this scene, Mo Chenga and Jing Xingji both frowned. They didn't expect this Master Song Feng to be so cruel to his disciple. Just one sentence didn't agree with him and he was about to hit her. Nye Wushang didn't know whether it was because she was used to being hit or because her personality was like this, but she didn't make a sound after being hit. She didn't even raise her hand to cover her face and just lowered her head. "You dare to doubt me?" Nye Wushang lowered her head and answered calmly, "I don't dare. I'm just surprised." "What do you know?" Master Song Feng didn't hide his disgust and impatience toward his disciple in front of outsiders. He didn't even act like this toward Mo Chenga, his enemy's disciple. Mo Chenga and Jing Xingji looked at each other and frowned. The relationship between this master and disciple was too strange. "Senior." Jing Xingji thought about something and asked respectfully, "Please forgive Junior for talking too much. With Qin Shoujing's temperament, how could he have a sweetheart? Could it be that Senior has misunderstood?" She never expected that Jing Xingji would actually defend her in front of Master Song Feng. Although it might not necessarily be useful, Mo Chenga still felt grateful. Unfortunately, Master Song Feng wasn't polite at all. He snorted contemptuously and said, "Brat, this matter has nothing to do with your Gujin sect. It's better if you don't think you're smart. Otherwise, I won't give face to old Yuanying." For Master Song Feng, killing a core formation cultivator was nothing. Presumably, Venerable Swordsman Yuanying of Gujin sect wouldn't seek revenge on Master Song Feng for a core formation junior, no matter how talented the junior was. Jing Xingji's heart was incomparably clear. Hearing those words, he clenched his fists tightly, but in the end he did not say anything. Master Song Feng's invisible gaze once again fell on Mo Chenga. Although this late-stage nascent soul cultivator in front of her didn't have a physical body, Mo Chenga could clearly feel his might. "Senior." Under this kind of pressure, she chose to speak first. "What advice does Senior have for me? How could I dare to give advice to Qin Jinghe's disciple?" Master Song Feng said sarcastically. Soon after, he said proudly, "You don't need to take chances. I just happened to run into Qin Jinghe and the others. Your master clearly told others that Qin Shoujing already has a sweetheart who's also his disciple. That Qin Shoujing also said he got separated from you here and was very anxious. Presumably, aside from you, there can't be anyone else in his heart, right?" Upon hearing what Master Song Feng said, Mo Chenga's heart was filled with joy. In that case, Senior Martial Brother Shoujing had already met up with Master? Then she could rest assured. With Master here, Senior Martial Brother Shoujing would definitely be fine. Thinking up to this point, although the current situation was still a dead end for her, Mo Chenga's mood became better. She smiled and said to Master Song Feng, "Since I've fallen into Senior's hands, Junior has nothing to say. I wonder how Senior will deal with Junior?" Her abnormally relaxed attitude made Master Song Feng a bit puzzled. "Aren't you afraid?" "What if I'm afraid?" Mo Chenga said faintly, "Will Senior let me go if I'm afraid? Junior has never done this kind of thing. That's a waste of energy." The black cloud was quiet for a while, but Master Song Feng's laughter came from inside. "Haha, you're really interesting, little girl. What a pity, what a pity. You just had to be that old fool Qin Jinghe's disciple." His voice turned cold and he said with an evil smile, "Qin Jinghe's last disciple, Qin Shoujing's sweetheart? God is really on my side. If I kill you, those two people will definitely be in so much pain that they'll wish they were dead, right?" Master Song Feng's gloomy voice sent a chill down Mo Chenga's back. She composed herself and said, "Senior thinks too highly of me. Junior's master and Senior Martial Brother are both people with very firm Dao hearts. If Junior dies an unnatural death, maybe they'll be sad for a while, but for cultivators the most important thing is still the path to immortality. Nothing will change." What she said wasn't just an excuse, it was also what she really thought. If she died, her master and Senior Martial Brother Shoujing would naturally be sad for her. However, they were all cultivators, and for cultivators, what could be more important than the Great Tao? No matter how sad something was, it would pass. Only the Great Tao was the supreme pursuit. Thinking up to this point, Mo Chenga suddenly felt a bit depressed. She couldn't help but laugh at herself. Could it be that after confessing her feelings she also became sentimental? What was so strange about that? They were cultivators. For cultivators there might be unforgettable feelings, but they wouldn't be in so much pain that they'd wish they were dead. Master. Nie Wuxiang, who was standing next to the black cloud, suddenly spoke. She stared at Immerse and said, Master, if you want to kill her, can you let disciple do it? Fellow Taoist Nye. Jing Xingji couldn't help but say, you. Nie Wuxiang's gaze swept over them, but it didn't linger on Jing Xingji. She only looked respectfully at the black cloud. After a while, Master Song Feng's voice came from the black cloud. Do you want to compete with her? Nie Wuxiang said faintly, Disciple didn't defeat her several decades ago, so I'm not convinced. I hope Master can help me. Immerse couldn't help but glance at Nie Wuxiang. Her expression was very calm. Immerse couldn't tell whether she wanted to help her or not. However, if Master Song Feng agreed to this matter, it would definitely be beneficial to her. Although Nie Wuxiang was formidable, it wouldn't be a problem for her to hold on for less than an hour. At that time, Master Song Feng's cold humph interrupted her thoughts, but she heard him say, Who said I wanted to kill her? What he said stunned Immerse and the other two. Nie Wuxiang was even more stunned for a while. She then said with some uncertainty, Master, don't kill her? As soon as she finished speaking, another gust of strong wind swept past, leaving another red mark on her fair cheeks. Master Song Feng's impatient voice rang out. You dare to guess this old man's thoughts? Nie Wuxiang shut her mouth, lowered her head and said nothing. This master and disciple really didn't look like master and disciple. Nie Wuxiang's respect towards Master Song Feng was more of fear, and Master Song Feng didn't cherish Nie Wuxiang at all. It could even be said that even a servant wouldn't lower himself to this extent, let alone a disciple. Immerse suddenly understood what Nie Wuxiang said when they met. With such a master, it was no wonder she envied her good life. In comparison, her life was indeed much better. Master had never said a harsh word to her and was always considerate of her. Immerse didn't hate Nie Wuxiang because they were originally on opposite sides, so it was normal for Nie Wuxiang to turn around and tell her master about her whereabouts. Of course, she didn't love Nie Wuxiang because Nie Wuxiang was her enemy. Immerse wasn't a person who would waste her sympathy casually. Now, seeing Nie Wuxiang without the slightest dignity in front of Master Song Feng, Immerse only felt it was a pity. It was a pity that this rather proud woman was actually Master Song Feng's disciple. Kill her? Of course, if I do that, Qin Jinghe and Qin Shoujing will definitely be in a lot of pain. But it doesn't seem that interesting. And I have to think about how to deal with this little girl. I got it. The voice in the black cloud suddenly became very strange. It sounded complacent, but it also made people's hair stand on end. Immerse felt a powerful spiritual aura pressure covering her body, making her unable to move. A wave of fear that made her shiver suddenly enveloped her whole body. Little girl, you're actually quite good looking, the voice in the black cloud said. Immerse suddenly thought of a possibility. Cold sweat instantly broke out on her body. It couldn't really be like what I thought, right? Tsk. The black cloud swayed. The voice was so soft that it made people's hair stand on end. Little girl, if you want to blame someone, blame your senior martial brother Shoujing. Who told you to be so coincidentally loved by him? I really want to see how he'll feel after the woman he loves loses her virginity. Ah. Qin Shoujing, you killed my disciple, so I'll let you have a taste of what it's like to eat a fly. Ah. Immerse finally heard this affirmation. She felt her brain go numb in an instant and she almost lost her mind. In that instant, countless thoughts flashed through her mind. In the end she blurted out, You're just a late-stage nascent soul cultivator, yet you actually want to do such a despicable thing? Despicable? Master Song Feng's voice was cold. Little girl, in this cultivation world where the weak are prey to the strong, could it be that there's still such a noble thing? Be that as it may, Senior's way of thinking is a bit too filthy. The one who spoke was Jing Xingji. His expression was extremely unsightly. Senior did such a thing to a junior. Aren't you afraid of being ridiculed by the cultivation world? Ha 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 ha. Master Song Feng laughed. Why would I be afraid of being ridiculed? Brat, can't you tell? You're the one who should be worried. Jing Xingji was dumbfounded. What do you mean? Master Song Feng disdained to answer. The black cloud surged and a strong wind suddenly rose around Immerse and Jing Xingji, carrying a bitingly cold aura oppressing them. Immerse couldn't care about anything else. She instantly summoned the white silk handkerchief to protect her body. Then she pressed the space between her eyebrows, wanting to enter the virtual sky world. She wasn't someone who couldn't keep her cool, but Master Song Feng's words had already made her lose her mind. This kind of thing was too disgusting. However, in front of a late-stage nascent soul cultivator, how could she make it in time? She felt her whole body go numb, and in an instant she lost consciousness. Chapter 300. Master. Inside the fog, Qin suddenly stopped and frowned. What's wrong? Lord Dawish Jinghe asked casually. Qin sniffed the smell in the air and said, Tienga might be sending a message. Lord Dawish Jinghe tilted his head. Qin sniffed again and finally nodded with certainty. Yes, it's Tienga. Hearing his certainty, Lord Dawish Jinghe asked curiously, Is there any special communication method between you and Tienga? Qin said, Sort of. I didn't expect to use it at that time. Master, follow this smell. Tienga must be there. Lord Dawish Jinghe also sniffed. The smell in the air was very similar to the smell of flowers and plants. If he didn't pay attention, he might think it was the smell of nearby flowers and plants, but if he smelled it carefully, it seemed very unique. Since this guy was so sure, it must be his personal property. Following this smell, the two of them walked forward slowly. At first, they had to take their time to distinguish the smell, but as the smell became stronger, they walked faster and faster. The fog gradually faded, and in the blink of an eye, the two of them left the fog. Lord Dawish Jinghe said in surprise, This girl, she came out a long time ago. Qin was also very happy to see this. She's always been smart. I wonder what method she thought of. As they spoke, the two of them stopped. This was the place with the strongest smell. At the same time, Qin also found a pile of black ash on the ground, proving that the smell really came from here. But the strange thing was there was no one around. He spread his divine sense, but there was no one within dozens of miles. Master? Qin was puzzled. Did you find anyone around? Lord Dawish Jinghe shook his head. No. The divine sense of a nascent soul cultivator covered a large area, but there was no spiritual aura fluctuation of cultivators as far as his divine sense could reach. Lord Dawish Jinghe turned to look in the direction they came from and said, Could it be that she went inside again? Probably not. Qin frowned. Tienga has always been steady. Since she sent a message here, she should be waiting for us here unless it's been too long or something happened. Something happened. Lord Dawish Jinghe looked solemn. His eyes swept the surrounding scenery like lightning, and his expression suddenly changed. Not good. What's wrong? Qin asked anxiously, Master, what did you see? Lord Dawish Jinghe didn't answer right away. With a wave of his sleeve, a wisp of faint red spiritual aura filled the air and shrouded the surroundings. Gradually, a bit of black appeared in the faint red. Qin's expression also changed. This is demonic qi. Lord Dawish Jinghe frowned. There's no devil aura at all in Immortal's ruins. This devil aura is also very different from the devil aura on Demonic Mountain. I've only seen this kind of devil aura on one person. Qin didn't need to say anything because he already knew. He muttered, Master Song Feng, yes. Lord Dawish Jinghe's expression darkened. Master Song Feng was here. Qin's complexion turned even paler. He almost didn't dare to imagine what had happened. Master Song Feng had been here, but Mo Tienga wasn't there. She was in the early stage of the core formation realm, the #1 cultivator in the celestial pole. Don't worry. Lord Dawish Jinghe comforted him and took something out of his robe. It was a very small lamp, only the size of a palm. The light inside the lampshade was very bright. This was Mo Tienga's natal primordial spirit lamp. Lord Dawish Jinghe asked her for her blood essence to make it. As long as she was alive, this lamp would always be on. Seeing that the lamp was bright, Lord Dawish Jinghe smiled. You see, her natal lamp is fine, so she must be fine. There's no trace of fighting around, so maybe Tienga has already escaped. Right. Qin nodded. After taking a deep breath, he pulled himself together. Master, let's look for her again. Maybe Tienga was taken away by Master Song Feng, or maybe she's smart and ran away. Although the latter possibility was very low, it wasn't completely impossible. The fact that her natal lamp was so bright showed that she was still in good condition, which was a good thing. There were no traces of fighting around, so maybe Master Song Feng just took her away. Lord Dawish Jinghe was gratified to see that Qin could still maintain his composure and didn't panic. Since it was Tienga who sent the message, can we follow this smell to find her again? She thought for a moment. We can try. He got this amber when he got the yang spiritual bead years ago. It was an ancient object and he didn't know its use at first. Once, he accidentally burned it with real fire and found that its smell was special and could spread very far, so he thought it could be used to send messages. When he gave it to Chenga, he didn't think too much. He just thought the amber was very beautiful and rare in the world, so he wanted to please her. Unexpectedly, Chenga didn't pay attention to the amber among the pile of things, which made him feel lost for a long time. Now the amber actually came in handy, which was a pleasant surprise. It was much more difficult to follow the smell to find her again. The smell was getting fainter and fainter, and it was difficult to distinguish it. They kept looking and kept looking back. As time passed, Chenga's natal lamp seemed to show signs of weakening, so they couldn't help but become more and more anxious. The most terrible thing was that no matter how they looked, the most likely place for Chenga to go was still in the fog. When the appointed time with Lord Taoist Huayan came, they still couldn't find Chenga. Lord Taoist Jingha had no choice but to send a message to Lord Taoist Huayan to find her together. In that case, if they met Master Song Feng, they might have a chance. Lord Taoist Huayan didn't have any objection. Chenga wasn't an ordinary disciple. With her talent, she would definitely become the pillar of the new generation of Shenqing school in 100 years. As a Lord Taoist of the nascent soul realm, he should consider the interests of the school. However, they didn't have much time. The two Lord Taoists and the two nascent soul cultivators of Tiandao sect had an appointment to go to Jade Palace in Immortal's ruins. There was still half a day before their meeting. If they missed it, it would be hard to explain. Soon after, the three of them met, and Lord Taoist Huayan asked, "Senior Martial Brother Jingha, what's going on? Why was Qingwei taken by Master Song Feng?" Lord Taoist Jingha said, "We'll talk about it later. Junior Martial Brother Huayan, we don't have much time. Let's go find her first." Lord Taoist Huayan nodded and said, "Okay." Lord Taoist Jingha and Lord Taoist Huayan each took out their flying magic weapons and disappeared into the fog in the blink of an eye. Chenga felt like she was dreaming, a bizarre and painful dream. "Master." She heard a familiar voice with some anxiety. Isn't this too?" With a heavy bang, an old hoarse voice said angrily, "What? Do you sympathize with her?" "I don't dare." "Umph. Since you don't dare do it?" "Yes." Then she heard light footsteps. Then she was helped up and something was stuffed into her mouth. It was some bean-like things. She was afraid instinctively that she shouldn't swallow these things. She was worried that this person would force her to swallow them, but this person just lifted her chin and put one hand on her throat. Those things didn't slide in. But as time went by, the things in her mouth seemed to ooze juice and slowly flowed down her throat. Then she felt that her remaining rationality was gone. Her whole body became hot, as if she was melting in the flames. The three of them flew back and forth for a long time. The smell became fainter and fainter, but they still couldn't find Chenga. She was very anxious. He knew it was very important for Master and Martial Uncle Huayan to go to Jade Palace. If they couldn't find Chenga when the time was up, Martial Uncle Huayan wouldn't be willing to waste time. The longer they waited, the more dangerous it would be for Chenga. "Master." He turned around and only said one sentence, but Lord Taoist Jingha raised his hand to stop him. Lord Taoist Jingha was also very anxious. The matter of Jade Palace was related to his chance to advance to the late stage of the nascent soul realm, but he also valued Chenga's life. He didn't want to give up either. But when the time was up, he had to give up one of them. Lord Taoist Jingha's expression changed for a long time. Finally, he made up his mind and said, "It's too late. This is the only way." For a moment, she didn't know what Lord Taoist Jingha meant. Lord Taoist Huayan's expression changed when he saw Lord Taoist Jingha taking out a natal lamp from his bosom. "Senior Martial Brother, this will affect your strength." Lord Taoist Jingha was unmoved. He said faintly, "I can still afford to lose this bit of strength. Junior Martial Brother Huayan, you don't need to say more." After that, he pressed the space between his eyebrows and was about to cast a spell. "Master." However, it was Shi who stopped him. He reached out to cover the natal lamp, which was still lit but a bit weaker than before. He knew what Master wanted to do. The fog blocked divine sense, but the connection between blood essence couldn't be stopped, so Master wanted to force his own blood essence to sense Chenga's location. That was absolutely impossible. Every cultivator knew the importance of blood essence. If it was lost, his strength would decline a bit. Normally he could recover it with some time. However, the place Lord Taoist Jingha was going to was not a small matter. There were many nascent soul cultivators. If he lost some of his strength, his chances of survival would be lower. She took a deep breath, and a resolute expression appeared on his face. Master, let me do it. You? Lord Daoist Jinghe paused. I might not be able to take you with me later. If you lose your strength, what will you do in Immortal's ruins? She smiled and said confidently, Master, don't you trust me? More than 80 years ago, I was only in the middle stage of the core formation realm, but I still survived in Immortal's ruins, let alone now. Lord Daoist Jinghe looked pensive, but in the end he nodded. All right, if you have something to do, find a safe place to hide and send a message to Master. Don't take too many risks. Master, you're still worried about me? She smiled. He took Mo Chinga's natal primordial spirit lamp from Lord Daoist Jinghe, pressed the space between his eyebrows and began to cast a spell. A spiritual light appeared between his eyebrows. Soon after, a drop of dark red blood essence was forced out of the space between his eyebrows. She carefully guided this drop of blood essence to fly towards the natal lamp, merging it with the blood essence hidden deep inside. In an instant, a strange feeling appeared in his mind. In a hazy state, everything around him seemed to be far away, but some other things were extremely clear. The natal primordial spirit lamp swayed, and its light seemed to be a bit weaker. After a moment of confusion, she became sober again, and he had a clear direction. This way. Chapter 301. The three of them flew higher and higher in the fog. Lord Daoist Huayan waved his sleeves to block an immortal aura and asked Qinshi with a frown, Shoujing, are you sure? Why is it in the sky? Is it flying? It should be, Qinshi said. I also think it's strange. The position hasn't changed. It seems to be in the sky. As they were talking, Lord Daoist Jinghe's divine sense found something. He said, there's a mountain there. Qinshi and Lord Daoist Huayan immediately understood. Qinshi asked, Master, is there anyone in the mountain? Lord Daoist Jinghe shook his head. There are too many things in the mountain. My divine sense can't explore in detail in this fog. Although the divine sense of a nascent soul cultivator was much stronger and wouldn't easily get lost in this fog, the fog was so strange that divine sense couldn't play its original role. Qinshi understood this but didn't say much. He just sighed. On second thought, he already knew where Mo Chinga was. What was there to be afraid of? Therefore he restrained himself and followed the two nascent soul Taoists. The lonely mountain finally appeared in their sight. Because of the fog, they could only see its rough outline. As soon as they approached the lonely mountain, Lord Daoist Jinghe and Lord Daoist Huayan looked at each other and frowned. Lord Daoist Jinghe whispered, something's wrong. There are two people. Qinshi didn't understand what he meant. He was happy and asked, Master, did you feel it? Yes. Lord Daoist Jinghe said absent-mindedly, it's a bit strange. What's strange? Lord Daoist Jinghe didn't answer this question. He shook his sleeves, and the flying magic tool suddenly sped up and flew to the top of the lonely mountain. Lord Daoist Huayan followed him without saying a word. The three of them flew close and hovered over the mountain. The top of the mountain was covered with spiritual herbs with pink ball-like flowers, swaying in the wind and exuding an intoxicating smell. Qinshi looked down and saw soybean-sized beans under the spiritual herbs. They were densely stacked layer after layer and covered the whole mountain. The rocks were long gone. Heavenly aromatic beans. Until now, he felt an inexplicable panic in his heart. It seemed that something had happened without him knowing. When Lord Daoist Jinghe and Lord Daoist Huayan saw the heavenly aromatic grasses all over the mountain, their expressions changed. But they didn't say anything. How could they say something like that before they were certain? Two people? If it was really Master Song Feng who brought Mo Chinga here, his intentions were truly damned. In silence, the three of them descended to the peak. The flat mountaintop gradually became clear in the eyes of the three. Amidst the heavenly aromatic grass, the pink flower balls and the green vines that filled the sky, a blue and white color appeared. Upon closer inspection, it turned out to be a robe. Qinshi subconsciously held his breath. In an instant, his heart was seized by panic. Blue robes, white coats, cloak. These were the clothes of Xianqing School's female disciples, but there was also a man's cyan sword robe. This was Gujin Sect's uniform. Finally, there were two people submerged in the heavenly aromatic grass. Even though they were not hugging each other, even though there was a distance between them, the chaotic scene and their messy clothes were enough to explain what had happened. For a split second, She felt that there was nothing in his mind. He had never imagined that he would see such a scene. What had happened? Why was this happening? He wanted to calm down, but he couldn't calm down. As soon as his feet touched the ground, he staggered forward. Lord Daoist Jinghe called from behind but didn't stop him. Finally he ran up to her. Under the pink flower balls of the heavenly aromatic grass was the familiar face he used to yearn for day and night. At this moment, her eyes were closed tightly and she was unconscious. He opened his mouth but couldn't make a sound. He suddenly began to hate himself. Why didn't I keep an eye on her at that time? Why did I let her get lost and encounter such a terrible thing? If I could have been more careful, if they could have found her earlier. But now, all he could do was reach out his trembling hands, pick her up and hold her tightly in his arms. But even so, what happened couldn't be erased. Lord Daoist Jinghe caught up and sighed when he saw this scene. Calm down. She didn't answer as if he hadn't heard anything. Lord Daoist Huayan walked closer, glanced around and fixed his eyes on another unconscious person. He snorted coldly. Gujin sect. Who is this? How dare you? Lord Daoist Jinghe wasn't a kind person. Seeing this scene he was already burning with anger, but he managed to suppress it because Shi's reaction wasn't right. When he heard Lord Daoist Huayan's words, he waved his sleeve, and a spiritual aura shot out, hitting Jing Xingji's body firmly. Jing Xingji groaned, spat out a mouthful of blood and passed out again. Lord Daoist Jinghe turned around and called out. She didn't move. He just held Mo Tiange motionlessly. Lord Daoist Jinghe frowned, stepped forward and put his hand on Shi's shoulder. Wake up. After a long time, Shi's eyes finally moved, and he found that there were tears in his eyes. He wiped them away, took a deep breath and tried to suppress his emotions. Master, I'm fine. Because of what happened, he couldn't let anything happen to him. Seeing that she came back to his senses, Lord Daoist Jinghe breathed a sigh of relief and said gently, It's good that you understand. Don't worry. Tiange is fine. It should be because of the drug. She'll wake up in a while. She lowered his head and answered, carefully pulling Mo Tiange's clothes. During this process he didn't look at Jing Xingji next to him. Lord Daoist Jinghe paused and asked tentatively, What are you going to do? If you want to kill this boy, I'll do it now. A murderous aura flashed in Shi's eyes, but he suppressed it in the end. No need. I still have something to ask him. If I want to kill him, I'll do it myself. All right. Lord Daoist Jinghe was silent for a while. He looked at Mo Tiange, and a meaningful light flashed in his eyes. He asked slowly, What do you think, after this happened? She sat blankly for a while and seemed to hear what Lord Daoist Jinghe said. He held the unconscious Mo Tiange in his arms and said faintly, Master, what do you want to hear? Lord Daoist Jinghe couldn't say it for a while, so he thought about it and changed his words. You don't care? She clenched his fists as if he was trying his best to suppress himself. But after a while he still couldn't suppress himself, so he suddenly slapped his palm down. His spiritual aura was turbulent, tearing all the heavenly aromatic grasses around him to pieces. How could I not care? He said through clenched teeth, glaring fiercely at Jing Xingji not far from him. I wish I could kill him and tear him into pieces. I want to grind Master Songfeng's bones into ashes even more. But doing that will only let me vent my hatred. Things have already happened. If Tiange wakes up, she'll definitely be the one suffering the most. So you don't mind? She didn't answer this question. He closed his eyes and shook his head. Master, don't ask me. My mind is in a mess right now. That you're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.